The woman's voice cut through the Friday afternoon bustle of Whole Foods like a blade, sharp and deliberate. Her manicured fingers gripped an iPhone tightly as German words spilled from her lips with venomous precision. Sophia Morgan, CEO of Morgan Medical Technologies, was in no mood for pleasantries. The call with her Frankfurt partners had gone disastrously wrong. $50 million hanging in the balance because of his translation error that her team should have caught. The cheese aisle of Whole Foods suddenly felt like the only place she could breathe. Away from the boardroom, away from the disappointment in her brother James' eyes. She'd promised their father before he died that she would double the company's European presence. Now that promise was crumbling because no one on her team could properly translate a technical medical contract. In her frustration, Sophia continued her tirade in German, a language she'd learned at her Swiss boarding school but rarely used outside of business. Her eyes fell on a man in paint-stained jeans standing near the dairy section. His weathered hands gripped a shopping cart where a young girl sat swinging her legs, her strawberry blonde hair tied in a simple ponytail, blue eyes curious beneath slightly outgrown bangs. "Look at that man," Sophia muttered in German, her voice low but clear. "Shabby clothes, child dressed so poorly. Probably cannot even afford proper education for his daughter, feeding her cheap processed food instead of organic." The words were petty beneath her, but the release felt good. No one in this American supermarket would understand anyway. The anonymity of a foreign language was her sanctuary in this moment of weakness. Then the man turned slowly. His expression remained calm, but his eyes, dark and intelligent, fixed directly on Sophia's. His voice emerged in perfect fluid German. "I understand every word you are saying, madam, and while my daughter may not wear expensive clothes, she is taught to respect others regardless of their appearance." Sophia's mouth fell open. Her iPhone clattered to the tiled floor, its screen spiderwebbing with cracks. A collective hush fell over the nearby shoppers, the kind of silence that follows unexpected drama. The checkout clerk paused mid-scan. An elderly woman pretended to be deeply interested in the nutritional content of mascarpone. The little girl looked up at her father, confusion in her eyes. "Daddy, what's wrong? What did the lady say?" Daniel Carter bent down to his daughter's eye level, his voice gentle. "Sometimes people make incorrect assumptions about others, Emma. This lady was speaking in German, and she didn't realize I could understand her." Emma's small face scrunched in thought. "Like the kids at school? The ones who laugh because I don't have new shoes?" Her voice dropped lower. "Or because I don't have a mom like everyone else?" The simplicity of the child's observation struck Sophia like a physical blow. She watched as Daniel's expression shifted, a flash of grief quickly masked by a protective smile. "Something like that, sweetheart. But remember what we always say about assumptions?" Emma nodded solemnly. "They make a donkey out of you and me." She giggled at the wordplay, clearly a familiar joke between them. Sophia bent down to retrieve her phone, her cheeks burning with shame. The spiderweb of cracks across her screen reflected her fractured composure. For a woman who prided herself on perfect control, on always being the smartest person in any room, this humiliation was unbearable. "I apologize," she said in English, her voice formal and stiff. "My call was stressful and I spoke thoughtlessly." Daniel nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that somehow made Sophia feel worse. No righteous anger, no matching rudeness, just dignity in the face of her pettiness. He turned back to the dairy case, selecting a small block of Swiss cheese and placing it in his cart next to a loaf of whole wheat bread and a gallon of milk. Simple groceries, honest groceries, the kind that stretched a budget but fed a family. Sophia noticed Emma was still watching her, those blue eyes unnervingly perceptive for a child so young. The girl held a box of store-brand macaroni and cheese, clearly a treat rather than a staple. "I truly am sorry," Sophia said again, this time directing her words to Emma. "Sometimes grown-ups forget their manners." Emma's face softened slightly. "That's okay. Daddy says everyone has bad days sometimes." She glanced at the chocolate cake in the bakery display, then quickly away, but not before Sophia caught the longing in her expression. "Please," Sophia said impulsively, "let me buy the cake for you, as an apology." Daniel started to refuse, but Emma's eyes had already lit up. Sophia watched the internal struggle play across his face, pride wrestling with the desire to give his daughter something special. "Say thank you to Ms. Daniel raised an eyebrow, realizing they hadn't been properly introduced. Morgan, Sophia supplied, extending her hand in a gesture that felt oddly formal given the circumstances. Sophia Morgan. Thank you, Ms. Morgan, Emma said with careful politeness. The cake looks really good. As they walked toward the checkout together, Sophia found herself studying Daniel from the corner of her eye. His clothes were worn but clean, his posture straight despite whatever burdens he carried. There was something about him that nagged at her, something familiar she couldn't quite place. The way he moved, the cadence of his speech, the quiet confidence that seemed at odds with his circumstances. Where did you learn German? She asked, curiosity overcoming her embarrassment. Heidelberg University, Daniel replied simply. 2 years of postdoctoral research in comparative linguistics. Sophia nearly missed a step. Postdoctoral research? The man in paint-stained jeans buying budget groceries had a PhD? And before that? Daniel hesitated, clearly weighing how much of his story to share with a stranger who had just insulted him. I taught university-level linguistics, Department of Comparative Linguistics at UMass Amherst. The pieces weren't fitting together. University professor to what? Handyman? The evidence of manual labor was clear on his calloused hands. The paint stains on his jeans weren't fashion statements. At the checkout, Sophia insisted on paying despite Daniel's continued protests. The teenage cashier, Ashley according to her name tag, seemed fascinated by the dynamic between them. She probably saw all kinds of customers during her shifts, but this particular interaction was clearly novel. Sophia handed over her Black American Express card without thinking, the same card she used for business dinners that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. She caught Daniel noticing the centurion symbol, his expression unreadable. Outside the store, Sophia hesitated beside her midnight blue Bentley. The contrast between her car and Daniel's aging pickup truck was stark, almost comical. Two different worlds that had collided in the cheese aisle and somehow found themselves sharing the same parking lot. What do you do for work now? The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Daniel shifted Emma's hand in his, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed. I do repair work, handyman stuff, some part-time work at the elementary school. His answer was matter-of-fact, neither apologetic nor defensive. He was what he was, and he'd made peace with it. But Sophia sensed there was more to the story. There had to be. You don't earn a doctorate in linguistics from one of Germany's most prestigious universities and end up fixing leaky faucets without something significant happening in between. May I ask, what happened? Sophia's voice was gentler now, genuine curiosity replacing her earlier condescension. Daniel was quiet for so long that Sophia began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. My wife, Sarah, was diagnosed with aggressive cancer 3 years ago. She was a microbiologist, brilliant woman. His eyes drifted to Emma, who was carefully examining her cake through the clear plastic container. I left academia to care for her. After she passed, 2 years ago now, there were medical bills, and Emma needed stability more than I needed a title. Academic positions don't just wait around. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt as Daniel continued. We're doing fine. Emma's school is good. We have a roof over our heads. Some things are worth more than professional prestige. Sophia stood momentarily speechless. The man she had dismissed as beneath her notice had willingly sacrificed a prestigious career out of love. She thought about her own choices, the relationships she'd let wither while climbing the corporate ladder, the family events missed for business dinners. I have a proposition, she heard herself saying. The words seemed to come from someone else, someone braver and more impulsive than the Sophia Morgan who'd walked into Whole Foods an hour ago. My company needs someone with your language skills. Translation work, German contracts, cultural consultation. She was improvising now, but the idea felt right, more than right. It felt like redemption. Daniel's expression remained carefully neutral. What kind of company? Morgan Medical Technologies, medical equipment manufacturing. We do a lot of international business. She paused, then added with what she hoped was professional confidence. The pay would be significantly better than handyman work. Something flickered across Daniel's features. Not excitement exactly, but something like cautious interest. You're offering me a job? You don't know anything about my qualifications, my work history, whether I'm reliable or competent. I know you're fluent in German, Sophia said firmly. I know you have a doctorate in linguistics. I know you handled my rudeness with more grace than I deserved. She glanced down at Emma, who was listening to their conversation with the intense focus children bring to adult discussions they don't quite understand. And I know you're raising a polite, well-adjusted daughter on your own. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The silence stretched between them while Daniel considered. Sophia found herself holding her breath, surprised by how much his answer mattered to her. This wasn't just about assuaging her guilt over the grocery store incident. This was about second chances and unexpected connections, and the strange alchemy that could transform a moment of ugliness into something resembling grace. Daddy, Emma said quietly, tugging on Daniel's sleeve, was the nice lady offering you a real job? Her question was innocent, but it cut straight to the heart of everything. A real job. Not pity, not charity, not a wealthy woman's attempt to buy her way out of an awkward situation. Something real and sustainable and dignified. Daniel looked down at his daughter, then back at Sophia. When he spoke, his voice was steady but cautious. I'd need to know more details. Responsibilities. Schedule. I have commitments. His eyes flicked to Emma, making it clear where his priorities lay. Sophia nodded, understanding flooding through her. She reached into her purse and withdrew a business card. Real paper, real ink, something tangible in a digital world. My direct number. Think about it over the weekend. If you're interested, call me Monday. Daniel took the card, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Why? He asked simply. The question contained multitudes. Why offer him a job? Why risk hiring someone based on a grocery store encounter? Why trust a stranger with her company's business? Because, Sophia said, surprising herself with the honesty of her answer, I think we both need this chance to be better than we were an hour ago. It wasn't a business answer. It wasn't strategic or calculated or designed to achieve maximum advantage. It was simply true. Sometimes the most important decisions weren't made in boardrooms, but in parking lots between people who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to reach for something better. As the pickup truck pulled out of the parking lot, Sophia stood beside her Bentley and realized something had fundamentally shifted. The woman who'd walked into Whole Foods that afternoon, impatient, judgmental, insulated by wealth and status, felt like a stranger. In her place stood someone who'd been forced to confront the ugliness of her own assumptions and found something unexpected on the other side. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Conference call with the Frankfurt team in 30 minutes. Are you still at the grocery store? Sophia stared at the message, trying to reconcile the world of international business deals and corporate strategies with the conversation she'd just had. Daniel Carter, who spoke fluent German and held a doctorate in linguistics but did handyman work to support his daughter after losing his wife, didn't fit into any category she understood. The drive back to her office in the city took 40 minutes, but Sophia's mind was still in that parking lot. She thought about Daniel's hands, strong and capable despite the calluses. She thought about Emma's polite thank you and the way she looked at the cake like it was treasure. She thought about university professors who became handymen and the kinds of losses that could reshape a life so completely. Her assistant, Margaret, was waiting with a stack of papers and a concerned expression. The Frankfurt call is in 5 minutes, she said, glancing at Sophia's uncharacteristically disheveled appearance. Should I reschedule? It was a reasonable question. Sophia Morgan was never late, never unprepared, never anything less than perfectly composed for international business calls. No, Sophia said, straightening her jacket and walking toward her office. Let's get this done. But as she settled behind her mahogany desk and opened the conference call software, her fingers found the edge of her cracked phone screen, the physical reminder of her encounter with Daniel and Emma Carter, of words spoken in anger and met with dignity, of assumptions shattered and possibilities revealed. The Frankfurt team appeared on her monitor, their voices filling her office with talk of quarterly projections and market expansion. Sophia participated, asked the right questions, made the appropriate decisions, but part of her remained fixed on the memory of a man who'd chosen grace over anger, who'd turned a moment of cruelty into an opportunity for unexpected connection. When the call ended, Sophia sat alone in her office as the evening shadows lengthened across the city. Her company employed hundreds of people, generated millions in revenue, held patents that advanced medical technology around the world. But somehow none of that felt as significant as the conversation she'd had with a single father in a grocery store parking lot. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for her head of human resources. Jennifer, it's Sophia. I may have a candidate for that translation position we discussed. Someone with exceptional qualifications who might be perfect for project-based work. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He's currently between professional positions, but has an extensive academic background. I'll send you his information if he's interested. It wasn't charity, Sophia told herself. It was good business. A man with Daniel's educational background and language skills was exactly what Morgan Medical Technologies needed for their expanding European contracts. The fact that he was struggling financially, that he had a daughter to support, that he'd handled her insults with dignity, those were just coincidences, context, background information that had no bearing on her business decision. But even as she constructed these rational justifications, Sophia knew she was lying to herself. This wasn't about German translation services or European contracts. This was about the moment when assumptions collided with reality and created something entirely unexpected. This was about second chances and the possibility that people could be better than their worst moments. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Sophia, the voice belonged to her brother James, calling from his office down the hall. I just got off a follow-up call with the Schneider people. They're still interested in moving forward with the merger discussions, but they want someone who can handle the cultural nuances. The language barriers have been causing problems. Sophia felt something click into place, like puzzle pieces finding their proper configuration. What if I told you I might have found exactly the right person for that? She said slowly. Someone with the academic credentials and cultural understanding to bridge those gaps. She was thinking out loud now, the possibilities unfolding in her mind like architectural blueprints. You have my attention, James said. The Schneider deal could be worth $50 million if we can navigate the communication issues. What kind of background are we talking about? Doctorate in comparative linguistics from a German university, Sophia said, realizing as she spoke that she was committing to something she couldn't take back. Fluent in German, obviously, academic experience, currently available for project work. She was describing Daniel Carter like a resume, reducing their complex encounter to bullet points and qualifications. James was quiet for a moment. Sounds almost too good to be true. What's the catch? It was a reasonable question. In their world, exceptional qualifications usually came with exceptional complications. People with doctoral degrees from German universities didn't typically find themselves available for sudden project work without some kind of story behind the availability. No catch, Sophia said, though she knew that wasn't entirely true. The catch was that she'd met this potential translator by insulting him in a grocery store. The catch was that she had no idea if he'd even accept her job offer. The catch was that she was making business decisions based on parking lot conversations and the way a man treated his daughter. I'll know more Monday. After she hung up, Sophia sat in her office as the building emptied around her. Through her window, she could see the lights of the city beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. Somewhere out there, Daniel Carter was probably helping his daughter with homework, or reading bedtime stories, or doing whatever single fathers did in the quiet hours of the evening. She thought about the cake they were sharing, the simple pleasure of chocolate frosting and a child's laughter. When was the last time she'd experienced something that uncomplicated? When had she last felt joy that wasn't connected to profit margins or market share or beating the competition? The questions felt dangerous, like examination of a life she'd been too busy living to actually consider. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from her personal assistant. Reminder, dinner with the Patterson Group at 8. Cars waiting downstairs. Another business dinner, another evening of strategic conversations and careful networking. Another night of playing the role of Sophia Morgan, successful CEO, while some other version of herself, the one who'd stood in a parking lot and offered a job to a stranger, remained locked away. She gathered her things and headed for the elevator, but something made her pause at Margaret's desk. Her assistant had left a neat stack of papers for Monday morning, along with a coffee mug that read, "World's Most Patient Assistant." The normality of it struck Sophia suddenly. Margaret had worked for her for 5 years, handled her schedule, fielded her calls, managed her professional life with quiet efficiency. But what did Sophia actually know about her? Did Margaret have children, hobbies, dreams that extended beyond organizing someone else's calendar? The elevator descended toward the parking garage where her driver waited with the Bentley. Sophia caught her reflection in the polished steel doors and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Same perfectly styled hair, same expensive suit, same confident expression. But something fundamental had shifted behind her eyes. Some certainty had cracked, leaving room for questions she'd never thought to ask. The weekend passed with excruciating slowness. Sophia found herself checking her phone more frequently than usual, wondering if Daniel might call before Monday. She attended her usual charity gala on Saturday night, made the expected donations, chatted with the right people, but her mind kept drifting to a little girl sharing chocolate cake with her father, to paint-stained jeans and careful grocery budgets and the quiet dignity of starting over. Sunday morning, she canceled her standing brunch reservation and instead drove to a small diner in a neighborhood she rarely visited. The kind of place where families gathered after church, where the coffee came in thick mugs and the pancakes were stacked high. She sat alone in a booth, watching parents with children, the easy laughter, the casual touches, the ordinary magic of family life that had somehow passed her on. By Monday morning, Sophia had convinced herself that Daniel wouldn't call. She threw herself into work with unusual intensity, as if the sheer volume of activity could drown out her disappointment. 3 back-to-back meetings, a presentation to the board, a conference call with regulatory officials. The day unfolded in a blur of professional obligations. Then, at 2:17 p.m., her direct line rang. "Ms. Morgan." The voice was familiar, careful, uncertain. "This is Daniel Carter. We met on Friday at Whole Foods." Sophia felt her heart rate accelerate in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine or stress and everything to do with possibilities she hadn't dared to hope for. "Daniel," she said, trying to keep her voice professionally neutral, "I'm glad you called." The understatement of the century. She was glad in ways she couldn't begin to articulate, relieved that their story would have at least one more chapter. "Have you had time to consider my offer?" There was a pause that stretched just long enough to make Sophia nervous. When Daniel spoke again, his voice carried the careful weight of someone making a decision that would change everything. "I'd like to hear more details," he said finally, "about the position, the responsibilities, the schedule." Practical questions from a practical man who'd learned to be cautious about opportunities that seemed too good to be true. Sophia smiled, feeling something like joy bubble up in her chest. "Excellent," she said, reaching for her calendar. "When would be convenient for you to come in for a proper interview?" The word felt inadequate. What they needed wasn't an interview so much as a conversation about second chances and unexpected connections, and the possibility that two people from entirely different worlds might have something valuable to offer each other. "I can do tomorrow afternoon," Daniel said, "after I drop Emma off at school." Always the father first, always thinking about his daughter's needs before his own. Sophia found herself respecting him more with each interaction, understanding why a little girl could grow up feeling safe and loved, despite whatever hardships they faced together. "Perfect," Sophia said, making a note in her calendar. 2 o'clock. She paused, then added, "Daniel, thank you for calling. I know this isn't exactly conventional, and I appreciate you taking a chance on—" She struggled for the right words. "On what? On her? On them? On the possibility that Friday afternoon's collision of worlds might lead somewhere neither of them had expected?" "Thank you for offering the chance," Daniel said quietly. Emma hasn't stopped talking about the cake or the nice lady who bought it for her. There was something in his voice, a warmth that suggested their encounter had left an impression on him too. That maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about job opportunities and professional advancement. Maybe it was about something more human and more necessary. After they hung up, Sophia sat in her office chair and realized she was smiling. Really smiling, not the professional expression she wore for business meetings and networking events. This was the kind of smile that came from genuine anticipation, from the feeling that something good was about to begin. She hadn't felt this way about a Tuesday afternoon in longer than she could remember. Tomorrow would bring answers to questions she hadn't known she was asking. Tomorrow would determine whether a moment of ugliness in a grocery store could transform into something beautiful and sustainable. Tomorrow would show whether Sophia Morgan, CEO and self-made millionaire, could become someone worthy of Daniel Carter's trust in Emma's cake-bright smile. But today, for the first time in years, Sophia found herself looking forward to tomorrow with something that felt remarkably like hope. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, but Daniel Carter's mind was anything but. As he packed Emma's lunch, peanut butter sandwich cut diagonally the way she liked, apple slices, and a small container of yogurt, he found himself rehearsing what he would say to Sophia Morgan. This wasn't just another job interview. This was a crossroads, a moment that could alter the trajectory of their lives. "Daddy, can I wear my blue dress today?" Emma called from her bedroom. "The one Mommy got me?" Daniel felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Sarah had bought that dress nearly 3 years ago, before her diagnosis. It was far too small now, but Emma still asked for it sometimes, especially when she was nervous or uncertain. "How about your red one instead?" he suggested gently. "We need to save the blue one for special occasions, remember?" What he didn't say was that he couldn't bear to tell her it no longer fit, that this tangible connection to her mother was another thing they'd have to let go. The growing up of a child after loss was a series of small heartbreaks, each milestone bittersweet without Sarah to witness them. The morning routine continued with practiced efficiency. Breakfast, teeth brushing, hair combing, backpack checking. As they drove to school, Emma chattered about her upcoming art project, but Daniel could sense the undercurrent of anxiety. "Daddy, if you get this new job, will we have to move again?" The question pierced him. They'd moved twice since Sarah died, first from their faculty housing when Daniel resigned his position, then to a smaller apartment when the medical bills became overwhelming. "No, sweetheart. If, and it's a big if, I take this job, we'd stay right here. Your school wouldn't change." Emma nodded, visibly relieved. "And would you still pick me up every day?" "Every single day," Daniel promised, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "That's non-negotiable." After dropping Emma off, Daniel drove home to prepare for the interview. He stood before the closet, staring at his limited wardrobe. The suit he'd worn for teaching was at least 3 years old, slightly too loose now after months of stress and grief had whittled away at his frame. He'd had it clean, though, and the navy blue was timeless. His one decent tie, a gift from Sarah on their last anniversary, completed the outfit. As he knotted the tie, Daniel caught his reflection in the mirror. Who was this man in the suit pretending to be a professor again? The calluses on his hands wouldn't fade in time for the interview. The slight sunburn on his neck from outdoor repair work last week marked him as clearly as a brand. Would he fit in the sleek offices of Morgan Medical Technologies? Or would he be as out of place as Sophia Morgan had been in his world at Whole Foods? 2 hours later, Daniel stood in the gleaming lobby of the MMT headquarters downtown, a 40-story testament to modern architecture and corporate success. The receptionist greeted him with professional courtesy, offering him water in an actual glass, not a paper cup. Everything about the space spoke of money, from the original artwork on the walls to the subtle scent of something expensive in the air. Daniel felt the weight of eyes on him. Not hostile, just curious. He didn't belong here, and everyone knew it, including him. "Mir Carter?" He turned to see a young woman with a tablet and an earpiece. "Dr. Carter, actually," he corrected gently, surprised by his own insistence on the title he rarely used anymore. The woman blinked. "Of course, Dr. Carter. Ms. Morgan is ready for you. Please follow me." The elevator ride to the executive floor was swift and silent. Daniel used the time to center himself, to remember that whatever happened today, he and Emma would be fine. They'd weathered worse, far worse. The doors opened to reveal another reception area, this one more intimate but no less impressive. Sophia rose from behind a desk that could have paid his rent for 6 months. "Daniel," she said, extending her hand. Today she wore a charcoal gray suit, her blonde hair swept back in an elegant twist. Professional, powerful, but somehow less intimidating than she'd been in Whole Foods. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the opportunity," he replied, acutely aware of the contrast between them. Her perfectly tailored suit versus his slightly worn one, her manicured nails against his work-roughened hands. Sophia led him through a set of glass doors into a conference room where a man with familiar features waited. This is my brother, James Morgan. He oversees our international division and the Schneider merger specifically. James stood, offering a firm handshake. So, you're the linguistics expert Sophia discovered. His tone was friendly but evaluating, the look in his eyes calculating in a way that reminded Daniel of tenure committee meetings. Discovered is a generous term, Daniel said with a small smile. More like insulted in German, and was surprised when I responded. James laughed, genuinely amused. Sophia told me about your encounter. Quite unorthodox recruitment methods, but sometimes the best talent appears in unexpected places. As they settled around the table, Daniel noticed a stack of papers before James. His curriculum vitae, he realized with surprise. You've done your research, and he observed. Of course, Sophia said. When you mentioned Heidelberg and UMass, it wasn't difficult to find your academic record. James tapped the papers. 6 languages fluently, published in top linguistics journals, postdoctoral research on Germanic language evolution and its impact on technical terminology. He looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes directly. What I don't understand is why someone with your credentials is working as a handyman. The question wasn't accusatory, just direct. Still, Daniel felt his spine stiffen. I believe Sophia mentioned my situation. She did, James acknowledged, but I'd like to hear it from you. Daniel took a measured breath. My wife was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. I took a leave of absence to care for her, which eventually became a resignation when her condition worsened. After she passed, I had significant medical debt and a traumatized 6-year-old daughter who had just lost her mother. Returning to academia wasn't feasible. The room fell silent. Daniel didn't elaborate on the nights spent beside Sarah's hospital bed, grading papers while she slept. He didn't mention how he'd continued teaching remotely until his department head had gently suggested that perhaps his focus was compromised. He didn't describe the day he'd packed up his office, colleagues avoiding eye contact in the hallway, unsure how to interact with grief so raw and visible. I understand priorities, James said finally. Family comes first. But that doesn't explain why someone with your expertise couldn't find corporate work. Surely there were options between professor and handyman. Before Daniel could respond, the conference room door opened, and a man in an expensive suit entered without knocking. Sorry I'm late, he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. Traffic was a nightmare. Richard, Sophia said, her voice noticeably cooler, I don't recall inviting you to this meeting. The man, Richard, smiled thinly. As CFO, I make it my business to be involved in all potential hiring decisions, especially for high-level positions. He turned to Daniel, extending a hand. Richard Peterson. And you are? Daniel Carter. The handshake was too firm, too prolonged, a power move as transparent as it was unnecessary. Mr. Carter is interviewing for the translation and cultural consultation position for the Schneider merger, Sophia explained, her tone making it clear this was not up for debate. Richard took a seat, uninvited. Fascinating. And your qualifications are? Before Daniel could answer, James slid the CV across the table. Doctorate in Comparative Linguistics from Heidelberg. Former professor at UMass Amherst. Fluent in German, French, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and apparently Japanese as well. Richard skimmed the document, his expression skeptical. Impressive on paper, but there's a considerable gap in your employment history, Mr. Carter. Nearly 3 years. Care to explain? It's Dr. Carter, James corrected mildly, and we've already discussed his circumstances. Richard leaned back, fingers steepled. With all due respect, this is highly irregular. We typically hire from established firms, not... He gestured vaguely at Daniel, whatever this is. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. This wasn't the first time he'd faced academic politics and corporate posturing. Would you like me to demonstrate my qualifications, Mr. Peterson? Richard raised an eyebrow. By all means. Sophia and James exchanged a glance, but neither intervened. Daniel switched to perfect, unaccented German. I understand your concern about my unusual background. 3 years ago, I was teaching advanced linguistic theory to doctoral candidates and publishing in peer-reviewed journals. Then my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and my priorities shifted completely. You see before you not a failure of career, but a deliberate choice made out of love and responsibility. He paused, noting Richard's surprise, then continued. If MMT is looking for someone who understands not just German vocabulary and grammar, but the cultural nuances and technical specificity required for medical contract negotiations, I believe my background makes me uniquely qualified. I've lived in Germany, taught there, published there. I understand how Germans think, not just how they speak. The room was silent when he finished. Richard's face had gone slightly pale. Well, James said finally, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, I believe that answers the language proficiency question. Sophia looked quietly triumphant. Richard, would you like Dr. Carter to continue in Mandarin, perhaps? Or shall we proceed with the actual interview? Richard stood abruptly. I have another meeting. We'll discuss this later, Sophia. He left without further comment, the door closing a bit too firmly behind him. I apologize for that, Sophia said once he was gone. Richard believes his role as CFO extends to all aspects of company management. Office politics, Daniel observed. Some things are universal, whether in academia or corporate America. James laughed. Indeed. Now shall we discuss the actual position? The next hour passed in detailed conversation about the Schneider merger, a German medical equipment manufacturer with revolutionary cardiac monitoring technology that MMT wanted to acquire and distribute globally. The deal had stalled over contract terms, cultural misunderstandings, and technical specifications that seemed to get lost in translation. Our last translator was technically proficient but missed cultural context, James explained. The Germans felt we were being aggressive when we thought we were being direct. Meanwhile, we thought they were being evasive when they were just being thorough. Daniel nodded. Germans value precision and comprehensive analysis. Americans tend to favor efficiency and decisive action. Both approaches have merit, but without cultural context, they create friction. As they talked, Daniel found himself genuinely engaged for the first time in years. This wasn't just translation work. This was applied linguistics, cultural mediation, the practical application of theories he'd once taught. His mind, which had been occupied with fixing leaky pipes and patching drywall, was suddenly alive with the complexity of language and meaning. We have a conference call with Schneider this afternoon, Sophia said. Would you be willing to sit in, not to participate, just to observe and give us your thoughts afterward? Daniel checked his watch. I would, but I need to pick up Emma from school at 3. We could arrange for a car to take you, James offered. Daniel shook his head. I appreciate that, but I always pick her up myself. It's important to her, to both of us, after everything that's happened. Instead of the impatience he expected, Daniel saw understanding in Sophia's eyes. Of course, family commitments come first. We can record the call for you to review later. As the interview concluded, James excused himself for another meeting, leaving Daniel and Sophia alone. Your brother seems supportive of this unusual hiring process, Daniel observed. Sophia nodded. James trusts my judgment, and he's desperate to save the Schneider deal. It was our father's vision before he passed away last year. I'm sorry for your loss, Daniel said quietly. Thank you. Sophia's expression softened slightly. It's different, of course. He was elderly, it was expected. Not like losing a spouse in their 30s, Daniel finished. Different kinds of grief. A moment of understanding passed between them, the recognition of loss, even if the circumstances were vastly different. I should go, Daniel said finally. I have a few handyman jobs to complete before school pickup. Of course, Sophia walked him to the elevator. We'll be in touch soon. But Daniel, she hesitated. Regardless of what happens with the position, thank you for coming today, for giving this a chance. As the elevator doors closed, Daniel leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The interview had awakened something in him. The scholar, the professor, the man who existed before grief and practical necessity had reshaped his life. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. By the time he picked up Emma from school, Daniel had completed 2 repair jobs and changed back into his regular clothes. Emma bounded into the truck, clutching a piece of artwork. Daddy, look, I made this in art class today. It was a drawing of 3 figures, a tall man with dark hair, a small girl with orange-yellow hair, and a woman with yellow hair. Is that you and me? And he hesitated. Usually the 3rd figure in Emma's drawings was Sarah, often drawn with wings or stars around her. That's you and me and Ms. Morgan, Emma said matter-of-factly. She bought us cake, remember? Miss Jennings said to draw someone who was kind to us. Daniel felt a complex emotion he couldn't immediately identify. That's, that's nice, sweetheart. The interview went well today. Does that mean you'll work in the big building with Ms. Morgan? Maybe. We'll see. Emma nodded sagely. I think you should. You look happier when you talk about it. Like how you used to look when you talked about teaching. From the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. 8-year-olds shouldn't be so perceptive about their parents' emotional states. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Daniel reviewed the recording of the Schneider call that Sophia had emailed him. Within minutes, he spotted the issues. The German executives were using technical terms that the MMT translator was interpreting correctly in vocabulary, but missing in context. Moreover, there were cultural disconnects, moments where the Germans were expressing cautious interest that the Americans interpreted as reluctance. Daniel worked until midnight, preparing detailed notes. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about proving to himself that part of his old life, the intellectual engagement, the expertise he'd spent years developing, could be reclaimed, that he could be both the father Emma needed and the scholar he'd once been. The next morning, his phone rang just as he was dropping Emma at school. Daniel, it's Sophia Morgan. I've reviewed your notes on the Schneider call. They're exceptional. You identified issues we've been struggling with for months. I'm glad they were helpful, Daniel said, watching Emma join her friends on the playground. More than helpful. James wants to offer you the position immediately, full-time with benefits and a salary that I think you'll find competitive. Daniel's heart raced. This was happening so fast. I'd need flexibility for Emma, school pickups, doctor appointments, the occasional sick day. Of course, we can structure the role around your family commitments, work from home options, flexible hours. It sounded perfect, too perfect. What about Richard? He seemed opposed to my hiring. There was a slight pause. Richard has input, but not final say. This is my decision, and James supports it completely. Daniel thought about the medical bills still piled on his desk, about Emma's college fund that remained empty, about the repairs his truck needed, about the look on his daughter's face when she had to tell classmates they couldn't afford the school ski trip. When would you need my decision? Take the day to think about it. Call me tomorrow. After hanging up, Daniel sat in his truck, mind racing. This job would change everything. Their financial situation, his professional identity, their future prospects. But change, even positive change, came with risks. New environments, new expectations, new politics to navigate. His phone pinged with a text from his next handyman client. Need to reschedule. Pipe emergency at another property. Daniel stared at the message, the universe offering him an unexpected moment of contemplation. On impulse, he drove to the university campus where he'd once taught. It had been nearly 3 years since he'd visited, avoiding the memories and the awkward encounters with former colleagues. The linguistics department was housed in an old brick building with ivy-covered walls. Daniel parked nearby and walked the familiar path, feeling like a ghost revisiting its former life. Students hurried past, absorbed in their own worlds, while faculty members walked purposefully between buildings, clutching coffee cups and looking harried. Had he ever been that young, that focused, that unaware of how quickly life could change? Daniel? Daniel Carter, is that you? He turned to see David Abernathy, his former department chair, staring at him in surprise. Dave had been a good friend once, before the awkwardness of Daniel's departure had created a distance neither knew how to bridge. Dave, good to see you. They stood awkwardly for a moment before Dave gestured toward the campus coffee shop. Got time for a cup? My next class isn't for an hour. Over coffee, Daniel explained the unexpected job offer, the potential return to using his linguistic expertise, the strange circumstances that had led to this opportunity. Dave listened intently, nodding occasionally. You know, when you left, we all understood. Family comes first. But the department lost something valuable when you resigned. I didn't have much choice, Daniel said quietly. I know that now, Dave admitted. But at the time, well, academia isn't always compassionate about life circumstances. There was talk that you'd lost your edge, that the emotional toll had compromised your work. Daniel winced. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. Take the corporate job, Daniel, Dave said firmly. Not just for the money, though God knows you deserve some financial stability after everything. Take it because your mind is too valuable to waste fixing toilets and patching drywall. Sarah would have said the same thing. The mention of his late wife's name hit Daniel like a physical blow. She always said I was meant to be a scholar, not a handyman. Smart woman, Dave nodded. Emma is stable now, right? She's adjusted as well as can be expected? She's resilient, Daniel agreed. More so than I am sometimes. Then it's time for you to start rebuilding too. Not just financially, but intellectually, professionally. Dave banged his watch on and stood. I've got to run to class, but Daniel, don't let guilt about moving forward keep you in place. Sarah wouldn't have wanted that. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small repair jobs, each one reinforcing Dave's point. Daniel was competent at this work, but it didn't engage his mind or feed his soul the way linguistics had once done. By the time he picked up Emma from school, his decision was made. Guess what, sweetheart? I got offered the job at Miss Morgan's company. Emma's face lit up. Really? Are you going to take it? I think so. What do you think about that? Emma considered this seriously. Will you wear a suit like when you were a professor? Daniel smiled. Probably, yes. Good, you look handsome in a suit. Mommy always said so. The casual reference to Sarah no longer caused the sharp pain it once had. Now it was a bittersweet reminder that even in absence, she remained a part of their family narrative. If I take this job, some things will change. We'll have more money for things like new shoes and maybe even that art camp you wanted to try this summer. Emma's eyes widened. Really? Art camp? Really? But I'll still pick you up from school every day. And we'll still have our weekend pancake breakfasts and movie nights. Promise, Oz? Pinky promise. They locked fingers solemnly, the highest form of oath in 8-year-old jurisprudence. That evening, after tucking Emma in, Daniel called Sophia. I'll accept the position, he said without preamble. Excellent, Sophia replied, and he could hear the genuine pleasure in her voice. When can you start? Monday, I have a few handyman jobs to finish up this week, and I'd like to give my clients some notice. Monday is perfect. I'll have HR send over the paperwork tomorrow. There was a pause, neither quite ready to end the call. Daniel, there's a dinner at my home this Friday. Nothing formal, just James and a few key team members discussing the Schneider project. Would you and Emma like to join us? It would be a good chance for you to meet everyone in a more relaxed setting. The invitation surprised him. You want me to bring Emma to a business dinner? James is bringing his kids, Sophia said quickly. They're older, teenagers, but Emma wouldn't be the only child, and my house has a pretty impressive game room that the kids usually monopolize. Daniel hesitated. This was moving beyond a professional relationship into something more personal. But perhaps that wasn't entirely unexpected, given how they'd met. We'd like that, he said finally. Thank you. Friday evening found Daniel and Emma standing before a house that seemed more like a small hotel than a private residence. Sophia's home was a sprawling estate in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, complete with gated entrance and manicured grounds. Daddy, is this where Ms. Morgan lives? Emma whispered wide-eyed. It's like a castle. It's certainly impressive, Daniel agreed, feeling increasingly out of place despite his best suit and Emma's new dress, a practical expense he justified as necessary for such occasions. A housekeeper answered the door, directing them to a spacious living room where Sophia was engaged in conversation with James and several others. She wore slim black pants and a silk blouse, less formal than her office attire, but no less elegant. Daniel, Emma, welcome, she said, crossing the room to greet them. I'm so glad you could come. Emma, usually shy with new adults, smiled up at Sophia. Your house is beautiful, Ms. Morgan. It's like the pictures in my fairy tale book. Sophia laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. Thank you, Emma. Would you like a tour? The good news about a big house is there are lots of places to explore. As they moved through the mansion, Daniel noted how Sophia interacted with Emma, not with the condescension adults often show children, but with genuine interest in her observations and questions. By the time they reached the game room, where James's teenagers were engrossed in a video game tournament, Emma was chatting comfortably about her art projects in school. Go ahead and join them, Sophia encouraged when the teens waved Emma over. They don't bite, I promise. Once Emma was settled, Sophia led Daniel back to the main gathering. She's a remarkable child, Sophia observed. So self-possessed for her age. She's had to grow up faster than I would have liked, Daniel admitted. Losing a parent does that. The dinner conversation flowed easily, focusing primarily on the Schneider negotiations and Daniel's insights from the recorded call. Even Richard, who had arrived late with obvious reluctance, seemed grudgingly impressed by Daniel's analysis. The problem isn't just language, Daniel explained, warming to the topic. It's cultural perception. Germans and Americans have fundamentally different approaches to business relationships. Germans build trust slowly, through demonstrated competence and reliability over time. Americans tend to expect trust up front, with verification coming later. James nodded. That explains why they keep requesting more technical specifications. We thought they were stalling, but they're actually following their normal trust-building process. Exactly, Daniel agreed. If you approach them with that understanding, acknowledge their thoroughness as a strength rather than a delaying tactic, you'll make more progress. The discussion continued through dessert, Daniel finding himself fully engaged in a way he hadn't been in years. This was what he had missed: intellectual challenge, meaningful work, the satisfaction of applying his expertise to solve real problems. After dinner, most of the guests moved to the patio for drinks, but Daniel excused himself to check on Emma. He found her in an animated conversation with James's daughter about a shared interest in manga art, both of them sketching enthusiastically on a digital tablet. "Daddy, look!" Emma held up the tablet, showing a surprisingly sophisticated drawing. "Lily is teaching me how to draw anime style." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Daniel said, relieved to see her so at ease. "Are you having a good time?" Emma nodded vigorously. "Lily says there's an awesome art program at her school. They even have a manga club." James's daughter, a poised 14-year-old, smiled. "Emma's really talented, Dr. Carter. She picked up the techniques super fast." "She gets her artistic ability from her mother," Daniel said, a statement that once would have been painful but now felt like a celebration of Sarah's continued presence in their daughter. Later, as the gathering wound down, Daniel found Sophia in the kitchen, unexpectedly alone as she arranged leftover desserts into containers. "Need help?" he offered. "Sure, these are going home with everyone. No one needs this much chocolate cake sitting around." They worked side by side for a few minutes, the domestic task creating an unexpected intimacy after the business-focused evening. "Thank you for including Emma tonight," Daniel said finally. "She's had a wonderful time." Sophia smiled. "I'm glad. She's a special girl. You've done an amazing job with her, especially under the circumstances." "I've done my best," Daniel said simply. "That's all any parent can do." Sophia handed him a container of cake. "For Emma, from what I gather, chocolate cake has become our tradition." The reference to their first meeting made Daniel smile. From insults in German to job offers and cake, quite an evolution. "Life takes unexpected turns," Sophia agreed. 3 days ago, I would never have imagined having the former chair of comparative linguistics at UMass helping in my kitchen." Daniel laughed. "And I wouldn't have imagined working for the woman who thought I couldn't afford proper education for my daughter." Sophia winced. "I'm never going to live that down, am I?" "Probably not," Daniel admitted. "But maybe it's good to remember where we started. It makes where we are now seem more—" He searched for the right word. "Meaningful," Sophia supplied. "It makes it more meaningful." As Daniel drove home that night, Emma sleeping peacefully in the back seat, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. From tragedy to struggle to an unexpected encounter in a grocery store that just might be the beginning of something new. Not just professionally, but personally as well. Monday would bring new challenges, new complexities, a return to the professional world he'd left behind. But for the first time in years, Daniel was looking forward rather than backward, seeing possibilities instead of losses. The future, which had for so long seemed like a thing to endure rather than anticipate, suddenly held promise again. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected gift of all. Daniel's first month at Morgan Medical Technologies passed in a whirlwind of activity. The transition from handyman to corporate linguist should have been jarring, but instead felt like slipping back into a familiar, well-worn coat he'd forgotten he owned. His mind, which had been occupied with practical matters of pipe fittings and electrical wiring, now raced with the complex interplay of language, culture, and business strategy. His office, an actual office with a door and his name on it, overlooked the city skyline. Sometimes in quiet moments, he would pause at the window, remembering the view from his truck as he drove between repair jobs. The contrast was still disorienting. The Schneider merger had become his primary focus. Daniel spent hours each day reviewing technical documents, participating in conference calls with the German executives, and providing cultural context to the MMT team. The work was challenging, intellectually stimulating in a way he hadn't experienced since academia, but with practical applications that gave him immediate satisfaction. Emma, too, was thriving with their improved circumstances. The steady income meant new clothes, art supplies, and most importantly, a sense of stability that had been missing since Sarah's illness. Each evening, she would greet Daniel with eager questions about his day at the big building, fascinated by his stories of international calls and business meetings. "Did you speak German today, Daddy?" she would ask, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I did," Daniel would answer, and then teach her a new phrase or word, delighting in her perfect pronunciation. Sarah had spoken some German too, and sometimes Emma would say, "Mommy taught me that one already," a bittersweet reminder of connections preserved. Only Richard Peterson cast a shadow over Daniel's new role. The CFO maintained a cool distance, his initial skepticism hardening into something more like resentment. In meetings, Richard would challenge Daniel's recommendations, question his expertise, or simply dismiss his input with practiced corporate indifference. "I don't understand why we need a cultural consultant to tell us how to talk to Germans," Richard remarked during one strategy session. "They speak English. We speak English. It's not rocket science." "It's not about the language itself," Daniel explained patiently. "It's about the cultural frameworks that shape how language is interpreted. Germans value precision and thorough analysis. Americans prefer efficiency and direct action. Neither approach is wrong, but misunderstanding these differences has real business consequences." James nodded in agreement. "Daniel's insights have already improved our communication with Schneider. They have moved forward on 3 provisions they were previously hesitant about." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Fascinating. Perhaps our new linguistics guru could also explain why they're still holding up the technology transfer agreement, or is that cultural too?" The tension in the room was palpable. Daniel maintained his composure, years of teaching hostile undergraduates having prepared him for far worse. "Actually, yes, their hesitation reflects a fundamental German business value: Gründlichkeit, thoroughness. They're not stalling, they're being diligent. If we acknowledge that value rather than pushing against it, we'll make more progress." Sophia, who had been quiet during the exchange, finally spoke. "Daniel's right. I've reviewed the correspondence. Each time we press for faster decisions, they respond with requests for more technical detail. We're working against each other instead of with each other." Richard leaned back, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to challenge Sophia directly. "Well, if our CEO thinks German bedtime stories are worth the expense, who am I to argue? I just manage the money." The meeting continued, but Daniel felt the weight of Richard's animosity throughout. Later, as they walked back to their offices, Sophia addressed it directly. "Don't let Richard get to you," she advised. "He's territorial about the Schneider deal. It was his project before you came on board." "I'm not trying to take credit for anything," Daniel assured him. "I'm just doing my job." "I know that. James knows that. Most importantly, the Schneider executives know that. Your approach is working, Daniel. The merger is making progress for the first time in months." Her confidence in him was reassuring, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's opposition went beyond professional territoriality. There was something personal in his antagonism, a quality of resentment that seemed disproportionate to the situation. The following week, Daniel faced his first major challenge at MMT. Richard had arranged a surprise presentation for the executive team, insisting that Daniel demonstrate the value of his cultural insights by analyzing a complex technical proposal from Schneider, one that Daniel hadn't seen before. "I thought it would be instructive to see our linguistic expert in action," Richard explained smoothly as he handed Daniel a 20-page document filled with technical German terminology. "The Schneider team sent this overnight. We need to understand their concerns about the cardiac monitoring software integration. You have 30 minutes to prepare." It was a blatant setup designed to embarrass Daniel in front of the executive team. The document was dense with medical and technical jargon, much of it highly specialized. Even a fluent German speaker would struggle without proper context. Daniel met Richard's smug gaze steadily. 30 minutes. I'll need a quiet room and access to MMT's technical glossary. Sophia started to object to this impromptu test, but Daniel shook his head slightly. This wasn't the first time he'd faced academic hazing. At Heidelberg, our senior professors had pulled similar stunts with visiting American scholars, testing their mettle with deliberately obscure texts. For the next half hour, Daniel worked intensively, breaking down the German technical terminology, identifying key concerns, and mapping them to cultural communication patterns. When he returned to the conference room, the entire executive team was waiting, along with two video screens showing Schneider executives who had apparently been invited to observe. Richard's smile was triumphant. "Dr. Carter, the floor is yours." Daniel took a deep breath and began his presentation, not in English, but in flawless German, addressing the Schneider executives directly. He outlined their concerns as expressed in the document, acknowledged the thoroughness of their analysis, and explained how MMT's technology would integrate with their existing systems. He didn't just translate, he reframed the discussion in terms that resonated with German business values: precision, reliability, and long-term stability. The German executives' surprise quickly gave way to engagement. They asked questions, which Daniel answered with technical accuracy and cultural awareness. By the end of the impromptu session, they had agreed to move forward with the software integration plan, a sticking point that had delayed the merger for weeks. When the call ended, the conference room was silent. Then James began to applaud, followed by the rest of the executive team. Only Richard remained stone-faced, his attempted humiliation having backfired spectacularly. "I believe that demonstrates the value of cultural consultation quite effectively," Sophia said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. "Thank you, Daniel. That was exceptional work." As the meeting broke up, Daniel caught Richard's eye. The CFO's expression had hardened from smug anticipation to cold fury. This wasn't over, Daniel realized. Richard Peterson wasn't a man who accepted defeat gracefully. That evening, Daniel shared the story with Emina over dinner, careful to frame it as a professional challenge rather than a personal conflict. "So you had to read a super hard paper in German really fast?" Emma asked, impressed. "Yes, and then explain it to everyone, including the German scientists who wrote it." Emma's eyes widened. "That's like when Ms. Barton gives us a surprise spelling test, but way harder." Daniel laughed. "A bit like that, yes. The point is, sometimes people test you to see if you really know what you're doing." "Did you pass the test?" "I think I did." Emma nodded sagely. "Mommy would be proud. She always said you were the smartest person she knew." The casual reference to Sarah still created a pang, but now it was more sweet than bitter. "Your mom was pretty smart herself," Daniel reminded her. "That's where you get your brains." After Emma was asleep, Daniel received an unexpected call from Sophia. "I wanted to apologize for what happened today," she said without preamble. "Richard's behavior was unprofessional and inappropriate." "It's not your fault," Daniel assured her. "Office politics happens everywhere, even in academia." "Still, I should have shut it down immediately. She hesitated. "I knew you could handle it, and I wanted Richard to see that for himself." "Well, I'm not sure I changed his mind," Daniel admitted. "If anything, I think he's more resentful now." Sophia sighed. "Richard has always been territorial, but this seems different, more personal. I don't understand it." "Some people just take an instant dislike to others. It's human nature." "Perhaps," Sophia agreed, though she sounded unconvinced. "In any case, I wanted you to know that your work today was remarkable." The Schneider executives were impressed. They emailed James afterwards specifically mentioning your presentation. The praise warmed him, not just professionally but personally. It had been a long time since Daniel had felt truly competent, truly in his element. The years of struggling as a handyman, always aware of his limitations in that role, had taken a toll on his confidence. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means a lot." There was a pause before Sophia spoke again. "Daniel, I'd like to invite you and Emma to my family's lake house this weekend. James is bringing his kids, and we thought Emma might enjoy the water in the boat. Very casual, just a day trip on Saturday." The invitation surprised him. This was extending beyond professional courtesy into something more personal. That's very kind, but are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose on family time. You wouldn't be, Sophia, you waiting. Say he might. Ma, you wouldn't be, Sophia assured him. James and I were just discussing how Emma and his daughter Lily seemed to hit it off at dinner. And honestly, these family outings can get a bit tedious with just adults. Having Emma there would be a welcome change of pace. Daniel considered the offer. Emma would love a day at a lake house. She'd been begging to go swimming as the summer heat intensified. And it would be good for her to spend more time with Lily, who seemed like a positive influence despite the age difference. We'd be delighted, he said finally. Emma will be thrilled. Saturday dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for a lake day. Emma was up early, vibrating with excitement as she packed her small backpack with sunscreen, a towel, and the new swimsuit they'd purchased just for this occasion. Is Ms. Morgan's lake house big like her regular house? Emma asked as they drove, following the GPS directions Sophia had sent. I imagine so, Daniel replied, though in truth he had no idea what to expect. The Morgan's wealth was so far beyond his experience that he couldn't begin to guess what constituted a lake house in their world. The answer, when they arrived, was both better and worse than he had anticipated. Lake house was a modest term for the sprawling property that came into view as they drove down a tree-lined private road. The main building was a rustic luxe structure of stone and timber, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pristine lake. A boathouse, a separate guest cottage, and meticulously landscaped grounds completed the picture of casual opulence. Wow, Emma breathed as they parked beside several high-end vehicles. It's like a fairy tale. Daniel felt a familiar discomfort, the sense of being out of place that had accompanied many of his interactions with the Morgan world. But Emma's excitement pushed aside his reservations. This day wasn't about him or his discomfort with wealth disparities. It was about giving his daughter a day of simple childhood joy. Sophia greeted them on the wide veranda, dressed in white linen pants and a blue top, looking relaxed and approachable in a way Daniel hadn't seen before. James's children were already down at the dock, preparing a sleek powerboat for the day's activities. Welcome to the family retreat, Sophia said warmly. I'm so glad you could come. Emma, momentarily shy, stepped closer to Daniel. Lily's been asking when you'd arrive, Sophia told her. She brought some new manga for you to see, and we have a paddleboard that's perfect for beginners if you want to try it. Emma's eyes lit up. Can I go see Daddy? Of course, Daniel nodded. Just remember your manners and listen to the adults about water safety. She needed no further encouragement, hurrying down the path toward the dock where Lily had spotted her and was waving enthusiastically. She'll be fine, Sophia assured him, seeing his instinctive parental concern. James is a stickler for water safety. Life jackets are mandatory, and we have a dedicated spotter whenever anyone's in the water. The day unfolded with surprising ease. James took the children tubing behind the boat, their squeals of delight carrying across the water. Daniel found himself relaxing, drawn into conversation with Sophia as they sat on the dock, feet dangling in the cool water. This place is beautiful, he observed, watching Emma's face light up as Lily taught her to balance on the paddleboard. Has it been in your family long? My grandfather built the original cabin in the 1950s, Sophia explained. My father expanded it in the 80s, and James and I renovated about 5 years ago. It's the one place that's remained constant through everything. Emma and I have moved 3 times in the past 2 years, Daniel said, the contrast striking him. First from faculty housing, then from our house when the medical bills became too much, and finally to our current apartment. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Stability is a luxury many people don't recognize until it's gone. A lot of things are like that, Daniel agreed. Health, time, the simple certainty that tomorrow will be much like today. They fell into contemplative silence, watching the children play. There was an ease between them now, a comfort born of shared experiences, despite their vastly different backgrounds. Daniel found himself studying Sophia's profile against the sparkling water, noticing how different she looked here. Softer, more authentic, freed from the corporate armor she wore at MMT. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek car coming down the drive. Sophia frowned slightly. I wasn't expecting anyone else today. The car parked and Richard Peterson emerged, dressed as if for a country club rather than a casual lake day. Sophia! James mentioned the family was out here today. I was in the area for golf, thought I'd stop by. His gaze fell on Daniel, and a flash of displeasure crossed his features before being masked with a tight smile. Carter, I didn't realize this was a staff outing. Daniel and his daughter are here as friends, Sophia corrected coolly. Emma and Lily have become quite close. Richard nodded, though his expression suggested he found this development inappropriate. How nice. Where's James? I have some updates on the Schneider financials I wanted to discuss. It's Saturday, Richard, Sophia reminded him. The financials can wait until Monday. Of course, of course. Just thought since I was passing by. He gestured vaguely. But you're right. Business can wait. Mind if I join you for lunch at least? I'm famished after 18 holes. The intrusion changed the atmosphere subtly but noticeably. Richard dominated the lunchtime conversation with golf stories and not-so-subtle name-dropping about his playing partners, a state senator and the CEO of a rival medical company. He positioned himself between Sophia and Daniel, effectively cutting off their previous conversation. Emma, who had been animated and chatty earlier, grew quiet in Richard's presence. When he asked her a condescending question about school, she answered politely but briefly, then asked to be excused to rejoin Lily by the water. Bright kid, Richard observed after she left. Must get that from her mother. The deliberate slight wasn't lost on Daniel, but he refused to rise to the bait. Sarah was brilliant, he agreed calmly, PhD in microbiology. She specialized in antibiotic resistance research. Richard seemed momentarily thrown by Daniel's refusal to take offense. Well, tragic situation, losing someone so young. Yes, it was, Daniel said simply. James, perhaps sensing the tension, steered the conversation towards safer topics, but Richard's presence had cast a pall over what had been a perfect day. When he finally departed, everyone visibly relaxed. I apologize for Richard, Sophia said as they watched his car disappear down the drive. He has a talent for imposing himself where he's not invited. Does he often show up at family gatherings? Well, Daniel asked, something about the situation striking him as odd. Never, James answered, joining them. That's what makes this so bizarre. Richard has never shown the slightest interest in our family time before. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Richard had come specifically because Daniel was there. The remainder of the day passed pleasantly, the earlier intrusion fading as they enjoyed the late afternoon sun. Emma, pink-cheeked from swimming and paddleboarding, declared it the best day ever as they prepared to leave. Can we come back sometime? She asked Sophia, her earlier shyness completely gone. Absolutely, Sophia promised. You're welcome anytime. Maybe next time we can try the canoe. On the drive home, Emma chattered happily about everything she'd done, especially her time with Lily. She's teaching me to draw manga faces, and she says I'm really good at it. She thinks I should take art classes. Can I, Daddy? Lily says there's a special Saturday program at the community center. Daniel smiled at her enthusiasm. We'll look into it, sweetheart. I think that sounds like a great idea. Emma's expression turned thoughtful. I didn't like that man who came, the one who works with you and Miss Morgan. Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Mr. Peterson, why not? He talks to you like Mrs. Harmon talks to Mr. Ramirez, who cleans our school, like you're not as important as him. Emma's perception was surprisingly acute, and he kept trying to stand between you and Miss Morgan, like he didn't want you to talk to each other. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought, not for the first time. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings about each other, especially at work. Does he not like you because you're smart? Tyler Jenkins doesn't like me because I get better grades than him. Daniel had to smile at the comparison. Maybe something like that. But don't worry about adult problems, okay? Did you have fun today? Emma nodded vigorously. So much fun. Ms. Morgan is really nice. She taught me to paddle the board by myself, and she didn't even get mad when I fell off and splashed her. The mention of Sophia brought back the memory of their conversation on the dock, the rare moment of connection before Richard's interruption. There had been something there, a bridge forming between their disparate worlds. The following week brought a new challenge. The Schneider executives had requested a face-to-face meeting in Boston to finalize key aspects of the merger. James had asked Daniel to attend as the cultural liaison, a role that would put him front and center in the negotiations. "We need you there," James insisted. "The Germans specifically asked for you to be included. They were impressed with your handling of the technical document review." Daniel was both flattered and concerned. "I'd need to arrange care for Emma. These meetings could run late." "Bring her," Sophia suggested unexpectedly. "We'll be staying at the Mandarin Oriental. There's a pool, room service, movies on demand. Emma would probably love it, and the meeting shouldn't go past dinner." "I couldn't ask you to pay for—" "It's a business expense," Sophia interrupted. "All employees attending the negotiation have accommodations covered. That includes you." The prospect of a business trip thrilled Emma beyond measure. The idea of staying in a luxury hotel, ordering room service, and swimming in a fancy pool while Daddy attended important meetings made her feel grown-up and special. "Can I bring my sketch pad? Lily says drawing what you see in new places helps you remember them better." "Absolutely," Daniel agreed, touched by this continuing influence from James's daughter. The friendship between the girls was unexpected, but heartwarming. A bridge between worlds, just as Daniel's role at Mente had become. The night before their departure, as Daniel was helping Emma pack, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Dr. Carter, this is Charlotte Williams, Sarah's sister." Daniel froze, immediately on alert. Charlotte had never approved of his decision to leave academia, had argued bitterly that Sarah would have wanted him to maintain his career even during her illness. After the funeral, their relationship had deteriorated to the point of occasional terse emails about Emma's well-being. "Charlotte, this is unexpected. I'm in town for a conference. I thought I might see Emma while I'm here." Her tone was casual, but there was an underlying tension that Daniel couldn't quite identify. "We're actually leaving for Boston tomorrow, a business trip." "Business trip?" Charlotte's surprise was evident. "I thought you were doing handyman work." "I've taken a new position with a medical technology company, using my linguistics background for international negotiations." There was a pause. "Well, that's good to hear, Daniel. It's about time you got back to using your education." Sarah would be pleased. Something in her tone still bothered him. "We'll be back on Thursday. Perhaps you could visit then?" "That would work. I'll be here until Friday." Another pause. "This new job, it's going well?" "Very well," Daniel confirmed. "It's challenging work, intellectually engaging, and the schedule allows me to maintain my commitments to Emma." "I'm glad," Charlotte said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "I've been worried about you both, about your situation." The implication was clear. She'd been concerned about their financial stability, their living conditions, the quality of life Daniel was providing for his daughter. "Our situation is much improved," he assured her. "The new position comes with excellent benefits and compensation." "Good. That's good." Another awkward pause. "Well, I'll let you get back to packing. Give Emma my love. I'll see you both on Thursday." After hanging up, Daniel sat on the edge of Emma's bed, troubled by the conversation. Charlotte's call, out of the blue after months of minimal contact, struck him as odd, and her questions about his new job seemed pointed, almost as if she'd heard about it from someone else. But that was impossible. Charlotte didn't know anyone in his current circles. It was just a coincidence. She was in town, wanted to see her niece, and was surprised to hear about his career change. Still, as he helped Emma fold her new swimsuit for the trip, Daniel couldn't shake a vague sense of unease. Something about the timing, about Charlotte's tone, about the sudden interest in his professional situation, left him with a distinct impression that there was more to this visit than a simple family reconnection. The next morning, those concerns were temporarily pushed aside by the excitement of departure. Emma, dressed in her nicest outfit, clutched her small suitcase with the serious expression of a seasoned traveler. The company car that picked them up, another business expense Sophia had insisted upon, was a source of wide-eyed wonder. "Is this what it was like when you were a professor, Daddy? Did you go on trips to important meetings?" "Sometimes," Daniel admitted. "Academic conferences, mostly, but they weren't usually this fancy." At the airport, they met Sophia, James, and Richard, who looked distinctly displeased to see Emma accompanying them. "I wasn't aware we were bringing children to business negotiations," he remarked acidly. "Emma will be enjoying the hotel amenities while we work," Sophia explained, her tone making it clear the matter wasn't up for discussion. James's assistant has arranged for childcare during the actual meetings. Richard's expression suggested he had more to say on the subject, but he held his tongue, instead turning his attention to his phone with exaggerated focus. On the short flight to Boston, Emma sat between Daniel and Sophia, chattering happily about her first airplane ride, while James reviewed negotiation documents across the aisle. Richard, seated several rows ahead, kept to himself. "I've never been to Boston," Emma told Sophia earnestly. "Daddy says there's a special library there with really old books." "The Boston Public Library," Sophia nodded. "It's beautiful. Perhaps we can visit if the meetings end early on Wednesday." Daniel watched their interaction with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. Sophia Morgan, CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, was discussing children's books with his 8-year-old daughter as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The woman who had once dismissed them in a grocery store was now encouraging Emma's interests, making her feel valued and heard. The transformation wasn't one-sided. Daniel had seen changes in Sophia too, a softening, a willingness to engage beyond professional boundaries, a genuine interest in Emma's well-being that went beyond mere politeness. As the plane began its descent into Boston, Daniel found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 months ago, he'd been fixing a leaky faucet in a stranger's kitchen, worried about making the month's rent. Now he was flying to Boston for international business negotiations, his expertise valued, his daughter thriving. All because Sophia Morgan had spoken German in a grocery store, never expecting to be understood. Life's defining moments often came disguised as ordinary days. A chance encounter, a split-second decision to respond, a willingness to bridge seemingly insurmountable differences. These small choices could alter the course of a life in ways no one could predict. The plane touched down smoothly on the runway, the Boston skyline visible through the windows. Emma grabbed Daniel's hand in excitement. "We're here, Daddy. Our adventure is starting." Daniel smiled, squeezing her small fingers in his. "Yes, sweetheart, I believe it is." What he couldn't know as they taxied toward the terminal was that their real adventure and their greatest challenges were still to come. Boston greeted them with crisp autumn air and a city skyline that sparkled against the harbor. The Mandarin Oriental welcomed them with the quiet efficiency of true luxury, uniformed staff who remembered names, amenities that anticipated needs before they arose, and a suite for Daniel and Emma that was larger than their entire apartment back home. "Daddy, the bathtub has jets," Emma called from the marble bathroom, her voice echoing with wonder. "And there are robes, little ones for kids." Daniel smiled at her excitement while unpacking their modest luggage. The juxtaposition was striking. Their few, carefully folded belongings now housed in a space designed for people who carried Louis Vuitton and expected champagne on arrival. A gentle knock at the door announced Sophia, who had come to check on their accommodations. "Everything satisfactory?" she asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. "It's incredible," Daniel admitted, "though I feel like I should be careful not to break anything." "The hotel is surprisingly childproof," Sophia assured him. "James has been bringing his kids here since they were younger than Emma." She lowered her voice. "Just avoid the minibar unless you want a $50 candy bar." Emma emerged from exploring, wide-eyed with discovery. "Ms. Morgan, there's a TV in the bathroom mirror." "I know," Sophia grinned. "Magic, right? Listen, we have a team dinner tonight with some of the Schneider executives who arrived early. Very informal, just to break the ice before tomorrow's negotiations. You're both welcome to join us." Daniel hesitated. "I should come, but Emma—" "Room service and movies," Emma suggested hopefully, clearly relishing the prospect of such grown-up independence. Sophia laughed. "Actually, James's assistant arranged for a sitter who can stay in your suite. She's worked with the hotel for years, completely trustworthy. But only if you're comfortable with that, Daniel." The consideration touched him. A year ago, even 6 months ago, leaving Emma with a stranger would have been unthinkable. But so much had changed. Emma was more confident now, more secure, and Daniel's protective instincts had relaxed as her resilience had grown. "If you're sure it's not an imposition," he said. "Not at all. The dinner is important. The Germans specifically asked if you would be there. They were impressed by your presentation." Pride warmed him, not just professional satisfaction, but something deeper. For years, he'd defined himself by his failures. The academic career abandoned, the mounting medical bills he couldn't pay, the promises to Sarah he couldn't keep. Now, finally, he was being defined by his competence again, by the skills and knowledge he'd spent a lifetime cultivating. "Then we accept," Daniel said, "both the sitter and the dinner invitation." That evening, dressed in his best suit, recently purchased with his new salary, Daniel joined the MMT team in a private dining room at a renowned German restaurant. The Schneider executives greeted him warmly in their native language, clearly pleased to converse without translators. "Dr. Carter, we were just discussing your analysis of our technical specifications," said Dr. Klaus Weber, Schneider's chief technology officer. "Your understanding of both the medical terminology and the cultural nuances was exceptional." "High praise from Germans," James murmured to Daniel as they took their seats. "They don't give compliments lightly." The dinner progressed smoothly, the conversation flowing between business matters and cultural observations. Daniel found himself acting as a bridge between the two companies, translating not just words but intentions, smoothing the edges of American directness and German formality. Only Richard seemed disengaged, nursing his drink and checking his phone with increasing frequency. Halfway through the main course, he excused himself to take a call, returning 20 minutes later with an odd expression that Daniel couldn't quite interpret. "Everything all right?" Sophia asked quietly when Richard rejoined them. "Fine," he replied, his tone clipping. "Just a personal matter." The rest of the dinner continued without incident, but Daniel noticed Richard watching him with a calculation that set off warning bells. Something had changed, something beyond the usual professional resentment. Back at the hotel, Daniel found Emma already asleep, the sitter reading quietly in the living area of their suite. After thanking and paying her, he checked on his daughter, gently tucking the blanket around her shoulders. Her sketchbook lay open beside her, filled with impressions of Boston, the skyline, the harbor, even a detailed drawing of their hotel suite with its enormous windows and luxurious furnishings. Daniel smiled at her artistic eye. Sarah had been the same way, always capturing the essence of places in quick, confident strokes. The genetic echo was both painful and comforting, a reminder that something of Sarah lived on in their daughter. His phone vibrated with a text from Sophia. "Early breakfast meeting tomorrow, 7:30. Main negotiations begin at 9. Sleep well." Daniel set his alarm, reviewed his notes one last time, and finally surrendered to the impossibly comfortable hotel bed. His last conscious thought was of Sophia's face across the dinner table, animated as she discussed the merger's potential, her eyes finding his whenever a cultural nuance needed clarification. There was a connection forming there, a bridge between worlds that went beyond professional courtesy. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Daniel woke Emma early, ordered room service breakfast, and arranged for her to join the hotel's supervised children's program while he attended the negotiations. "Will there be other kids?" Emma asked, suddenly nervous at the prospect of a day with strangers. "The coordinator said there are 3 other children around your age," Daniel assured her, "and you can call me anytime if you want to come back to the room." Emma nodded, her expression serious. "I'll be okay, Daddy. I have my sketchbook, and they said they were taking us to the aquarium." "That sounds wonderful." Daniel straightened the collar of her dress, another recent purchase, part of their new life. "I'm proud of you, Emma. You know that, right?" Her smile was pure Sarah. "I know. I'm proud of you too, Daddy." The negotiations were held in a sleek conference room at the Schneider American headquarters, a glass and steel building in Cambridge. Daniel sat between Sophia and James, facing the German executives across a polished table laden with technical documents, legal agreements, and the inevitable German precision engineering of fountain pens in leather portfolios. As the meeting began, Daniel quickly realized this was where the real work would happen. The previous discussions had been preliminary. Today was about finalizing terms, addressing concerns, and establishing the framework for the merger. The morning session progressed smoothly, with Daniel providing cultural context and linguistic clarity whenever the discussion threatened to derail over misunderstandings. The Germans responded well to his approach, appreciating both his fluency in their language and his understanding of their business ethos. During a mid-morning break, Dr. Weber approached Daniel at the refreshment table. "You have a rare gift, Dr. Carter," he observed, selecting a precisely cut sandwich. "Few Americans truly grasp our perspective. They see our thoroughness as obstruction, Our precision is in flexibility. I had excellent teachers in Heidelberg, Daniel replied modestly, and I've always believed that language is more than vocabulary and grammar. It's a window into how people think, what they value. Weber nodded approvingly. Exactly so. This is why we insisted on your presence. The previous translators gave us words, but you give us understanding. As the German executive moved away, Richard sidled up, his expression carefully neutral. Making friends with the enemy, Carter? They're not the enemy, Daniel replied calmly. They're potential partners. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. I just find it interesting how quickly you've ingratiated yourself, almost as if you've been planning this all along. Before Daniel could respond to the odd accusation, James called everyone back to the table. The negotiations resumed, but Daniel found his concentration disturbed by Richard's comment. There was something troubling in the CFO's manner, a barely concealed hostility that went beyond professional rivalry. The afternoon session focused on the technical aspects of integrating Schneider's cardiac monitoring technology with MMT's existing product line. Here, Daniel's value became even more apparent as he navigated complex medical terminology in both languages, ensuring that technical specifications were properly understood by both sides. By late afternoon, significant progress had been made. The Germans were clearly satisfied, and James looked more relaxed than Daniel had seen him since they arrived. Only Richard remained tense, his contributions minimal, and his attention often elsewhere. As they gathered their materials at day's end, Sophia touched Daniel's arm lightly. You were remarkable today, she said quietly. We've made more progress in 8 hours than in the previous 6 months. The simple praise warmed him more than he could admit. It's good work, he said. Important work. I'm grateful to be part of it. Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a moment of connection that transcended their professional relationship. But before she could respond, Richard appeared beside them. Sophia, a word? His tone was urgent. There's something you need to see. She frowned at the interruption. Can it wait? We're having dinner with the Schneider team in an hour. It really can't, Richard insisted, his expression grave. It concerns our new team member. The emphasis was subtle but unmistakable. Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. I should check on Emma anyway, he said, stepping back. I'll see you at dinner. The walk back to the hotel gave Daniel time to consider Richard's behavior. The CFO had been hostile from the beginning, but something had changed. The veiled accusation during the break, the urgent conversation with Sophia, it all suggested Richard had found some new ammunition in whatever campaign he was waging. Daniel's phone rang as he entered the hotel lobby. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with a local area code. Daniel Carter, he answered, his mind still on the day's events. Dr. Carter, this is Margaret from Child Services at the Mandarin Oriental. There's been an incident with Emma. His heart stopped. What happened? Is she hurt? No, she's physically fine, the woman assured him quickly. But there was an altercation with another child in the program. Emma became quite upset. She's with us now in the manager's office. Daniel raced to the indicated location, finding Emma sitting stiffly in an oversized chair, her face tear-streaked but composed. A hotel manager and a woman with a staff badge hovered nearby, their expressions carefully professional. Daddy! Emma ran to him, burying her face against his suit jacket. What happened, sweetheart? He asked, kneeling to her level. The staff member, Margaret presumably, stepped forward. There was a disagreement during an art activity. Another child made some comments about Emma's drawing of her mother, and Emma reacted strongly. He said I was lying, Emma whispered, her voice muffled against Daniel's shoulder. He said I made it up that Mommy was in heaven watching me. He said I just wanted attention. Anger flared hot and immediate. And the other child, Daniel asked, struggling to keep his voice even, has been removed from the program for the day, the manager assured him. His parents have been notified, but hotel policy requires us to document any physical altercation, even among children. Physical? Daniel looked at Emma in surprise. She wouldn't meet his eyes. I pushed him, and I might have thrown paint, a little. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Daniel had to suppress a smile. Sarah's temper had been legendary in academic circles, brilliant, composed, and utterly formidable when provoked. I understand your policy, he told the manager, but surely you can appreciate the circumstances. Emma lost her mother 2 years ago. This is a sensitive subject. The manager nodded sympathetically. Of course, we're not suggesting any further action is needed. We simply wanted to inform you directly. After completing the necessary paperwork and offering appropriate apologies, Daniel took Emma back to their suite. She was subdued, clearly embarrassed by her outburst. Am I in trouble? She asked in a small voice as they entered the room. Daniel sat beside her on the sofa. No, sweetheart, I'm not happy that you pushed someone, but I understand why you were upset. That boy said something very hurtful. I tried to use my words first, like you taught me, Emma insisted, but he wouldn't stop. He said only babies believe in heaven. Daniel pulled her close. Everyone has different beliefs about what happens after we die. Some people believe in heaven, some don't. But what matters is that we respect each other's feelings. I know, Emma sniffled. I just miss Mommy sometimes, especially when I'm doing art, because she always liked my drawings. She would love the ones you're doing now, Daniel assured her, especially the Boston skyline. That was beautiful. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. Can I stay with you tonight? I don't want to go back to the kids' program. Of course, I have a dinner with the German executives, but it shouldn't run late. We can order room service, watch a movie when I get back. He helped Emma settle with her sketchbook and a room service milkshake, then changed quickly for dinner. The incident had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. Emma had been doing so well lately that he sometimes forgot how fragile her emotional equilibrium could be, how deeply the loss of her mother had affected her. As he straightened his tie, his phone rang again. This time it was Sophia. Daniel, I'm afraid I need to cancel our dinner with the Schneider team, she said, her voice tight with tension. Something's come up. Is everything all right? There was a pause. I'm not sure. Richard has brought some concerns to my attention. About you. The cold weight in his stomach returned, heavier now. What kind of concerns? I'd rather discuss this in person. Can you meet me in the hotel bar in 20 minutes? Of course, Daniel agreed, though unease prickled along his spine. Emma had a difficult day, but she's settled now. Bring her if you need to, Sophia said. This won't take long. The hotel bar was dimly lit and half empty, business travelers nursing drinks after long days of meetings. Sophia sat alone at a corner table, a glass of untouched wine before her. Her expression as Daniel approached was troubled, conflicted in a way he hadn't seen before. What's happened? He asked without preamble, sliding into the seat across from her. Sophia pushed a folder across the table. Richard received this yesterday. He claims it came from an anonymous source, but I have my doubts. Daniel opened the folder with trepidation. Inside were printouts of emails, his emails, from his university account during Sarah's illness. Correspondence with department heads, with medical insurance representatives, with colleagues asking for extensions on research deadlines. Private, painful exchanges documenting the collapse of his academic career as he struggled to balance teaching responsibilities with his wife's deteriorating condition. I don't understand, he said, looking up in confusion. Where did these come from? Why would Richard have them? He says they raise concerns about your reliability, Sophia replied, though her tone suggested she found the explanation dubious. That they show a pattern of professional difficulties that might affect your work with us. Anger flared, hot and sudden. These are from 3 years ago, during the worst period of my life. My wife was dying. Of course there were professional difficulties. I know, Sophia said quickly, reaching across to touch his hand. I'm not endorsing Richard's interpretation. I'm telling you what he's claiming. Daniel forced himself to breathe, to think past the violation he felt. This is a deliberate attack. Richard has opposed my role from the beginning. But how did he get these emails? They're private, from a closed university account. Sophia's expression was grave. That's what concerns me most. This level of investigation. It's not normal, even for Richard. It's not just inappropriate, it's potentially illegal, Daniel pointed out. Accessing private university emails without authorization. I know. Sophia rubbed her temple, a rare gesture of stress. But there's more. Richard claims he has information that you've been in contact with Schneider executives before joining MMT. that your chance encounter with me at Whole Foods might not have been chance at all. The accusation was so absurd that Daniel actually laughed. That's ridiculous. I was a handyman fixing leaky faucets before I met you. I had no connection to Schneider or any medical technology company. I believe you, Sophia assured him, but Richard is presenting this to James as a serious concern that you might be some kind of corporate plant, positioned to influence the merger negotiations. To what end? Why would Schneider plant someone who's helping the merger succeed? According to Richard, to ensure terms more favorable to Schneider. He's suggesting your cultural interpretations might be deliberately skewed. Daniel shook his head, disbelief giving way to a cold anger. This is beyond professional rivalry. This is character assassination. I agree, Sophia said firmly, which is why I canceled dinner. I wanted to warn you before Richard takes this further. He's requesting a formal investigation. The implications hit Daniel like a physical blow. An investigation would mean suspension, potentially termination if Richard's fabricated concerns gained traction. He'd lose the job that had finally allowed him to rebuild a stable life for Emma, to use his expertise meaningfully again, to begin moving forward after years of grief and struggle. Why does he hate me this much? Daniel asked quietly. What have I done to deserve this level of hostility? Sophia looked away, discomfort evident in her posture. I think it's not about you specifically, Daniel. It's about me. I don't understand. She sighed, turning her wine glass slowly. Richard and I have a history. We were engaged briefly about 5 years ago. It ended poorly. The revelation surprised him. I had no idea. We've maintained a professional relationship, and he's excellent at his job despite his personal difficulties. But he's always been, she searched for the right word, possessive, even after all this time. Understanding dawned, and he sees my relationship with you as a threat. Our friendship, Sophia corrected, though something in her eyes suggested the distinction was important to her. He's noticed that we've become close, that I value your input, your company. So this isn't about the Schneider merger at all. It's personal. I believe so, yes. Sophia looked genuinely troubled. I've spoken to James. He's skeptical of Richard's claims, especially given the timing and the questionable methods used to obtain this information. But as CFO, Richard has influence. We can't simply dismiss his concerns without due process. Daniel nodded slowly, processing the implications. What happens now? There will be a formal review. You'll continue working on the Schneider negotiations. They specifically asked for you, which actually undermines Richard's theory, but the board will examine these allegations. And if they find them credible? Sophia met his gaze directly. They won't, because they're not. I won't let Richard destroy your career because of his personal vendetta. Her confidence should have been reassuring, but Daniel felt a growing unease. He'd rebuilt his life once already from the ashes of tragedy. The prospect of losing everything again, of Emma having to adjust to another dramatic change in circumstances, was almost unbearable. I should get back to Emma, he said finally. She had a difficult day. Sophia nodded, concern immediately shifting to his daughter. What happened? Daniel explained the incident at the children's program, finding comfort in discussing a problem that, while painful, was at least straightforward compared to the tangled web Richard was weaving. Poor Emma, Sophia said with genuine sympathy. Children can be so cruel without even realizing it. Would it help if I stopped by? I have some experience with grief counseling through the hospital foundation I work with. The offer touched him. That's very kind, but I think she needs quiet tonight. Maybe tomorrow? Of course, Sophia gathered the folder of emails, her expression hardening. I'll handle Richard. You focus on Emma in the negotiations. As Daniel rose to leave, she caught his hand. Daniel, I'm sorry. This is my fault. If Richard wasn't fixated on me, on us, this isn't your fault, he interrupted firmly. Richard is a grown man making deliberate choices. You are not responsible for his actions. Her smile was tinged with sadness. Thank you for that. Not everyone sees it that way. Back in the suite, Daniel found Emma asleep on the sofa, her sketchbook fallen open beside her. The page showed a drawing of 3 figures, a man, a small girl, and a woman with wings, standing before what appeared to be the Boston skyline. Family, past and present, together in Emma's imagination. Carefully lifting her, Daniel carried his daughter to bed, tucking her in without waking her. Then, he sat in the darkened room watching the city lights twinkle beyond the window and tried to make sense of the day's revelations. Richard's accusations were baseless, but the method of attack was deeply concerning. How had he accessed private university emails? What other information might he have gathered? And most troublingly, who else might he involve in his vendetta? The thought of Charlotte came unbidden to his mind. Her sudden reappearance, her unexpected interest in his new job, her questions about his improved circumstances, all of it took on a more sinister cast in light of Richard's machinations. Was it possible? Could Richard have somehow contacted Sarah's sister, exploited her long-standing concerns about Daniel's ability to care for Emma alone? The possibility was too disturbing to contemplate fully. Yet it would explain Charlotte's out-of-character call, her plan to visit immediately after their return from Boston. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His blood ran cold as he read the message. "Dear Carter, this is Charlotte's attorney, Marcus Brennan. She asked me to inform you that she'll be filing for temporary guardianship of Emma upon your return. Given your unstable employment history and questionable judgment, we believe this is in the child's best interest. We can discuss details when you return." The room seemed to tilt around him. Charlotte was trying to take Emma. After everything they'd endured, after finally finding stability and happiness, his daughter's only remaining family wanted to separate them. And based on the timing, there could be little doubt that Richard was involved. Daniel's hands shook as he called the only person he could think of who might understand the legal implications. "James," he said when the call connected, "I need your help. It's about Emma." James listened gravely as Daniel explained the situation, the text, the suspicion of Richard's involvement. "This is beyond inappropriate," he said finally. "If Richard is behind this, using a child as leverage in some twisted vendetta, can he do this? Can Charlotte take Emma from me?" "No," James said firmly, "not based on what you've told me. You're Emma's father, her legal guardian. You haven't done anything to warrant removal, but legal battles can be messy, expensive, and traumatic for everyone involved. I can't lose her, James. She's everything to me." "You won't lose her," James assured him. "I know several excellent family law attorneys in Boston. We'll get one on this first thing tomorrow." After hanging up, Daniel checked on Emma again, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. Blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around her, he thought of all she had already endured, losing her mother, moving multiple times, adjusting to new schools and reduced circumstances. And now this, his phone buzzed again. Sophia this time. "James just called. I'm so sorry, Daniel. This is unconscionable. We're meeting with our legal team at 7 a.m. We'll fight this together." The simple message, the unwavering support, brought unexpected tears to his eyes. From a chance encounter in a grocery store to this moment of crisis, Sophia Morgan had become something he hadn't expected. An ally, a friend, perhaps something more. Daniel moved to the window, looking out over the Boston skyline. The city where he'd once attended academic conferences as a rising star in linguistics, where he and Sarah had celebrated their engagement years ago, had now become the backdrop for another pivotal moment in his life. Tomorrow would bring legal consultations, strategy sessions, and continued negotiations with Schneider. But tonight, in this quiet hotel room, with his sleeping daughter, Daniel made a silent vow. He would not let Richard Peterson destroy what he had rebuilt. He would not let Charlotte take Emma from the only stable parent she had left. He would fight with every resource, every ounce of determination, every bit of the resilience that had carried them through Sarah's illness and death. Some things were worth fighting for. Some battles could not be conceded, no matter the cost. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring something that sounded like mommy. Daniel moved to her side, gently brushing hair from her forehead. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered. "Daddy's here. I'm not going anywhere." The promise was both comfort and determination. Whatever came next, Daniel Carter would face it with the same quiet dignity that had carried him through the darkest days of his life. Not just for himself, but for Emma, for the future they deserved, for the family they would always be, no matter what. Dawn broke over Boston with cold clarity, painting the city skyline in shades of gold and amber. Daniel had barely slept, his mind racing with strategies, contingencies, and the quiet terror that came with the threat of losing Emma. By 6:30, he was showered and dressed, watching his daughter sleep peacefully, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around her. At precisely 7, a gentle knock came at the suite door. James Morgan stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, a leather portfolio under his arm. Behind him stood a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and the keen eyes of someone who had seen every legal maneuver imaginable. "Daniel, this is Eleanor Winters," James said by way of introduction. "She's the best family law attorney in Boston. And a mother who doesn't take kindly to children being used as pawns," Eleanor added, her voice carrying the slight rasp of a lifelong Bostonian. James briefed me on the situation. "May we come in?" They settled in the suite's sitting area, speaking in hushed tones to avoid waking Emma. Daniel explained everything: Charlotte's history of disapproval, her sudden reappearance, the text from her attorney, and his suspicions about Richard's involvement. Eleanor listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound notebook. When Daniel finished, she looked up with the focused intensity of a general planning a campaign. "First, let me be clear. They cannot take Emma from you based on what you've described. You're her father, her legal guardian. There's no evidence of neglect, abuse, or inability to provide care. In fact, everything suggests the opposite. You've made extraordinary sacrifices for your daughter's well-being." The reassurance loosened something tight in Daniel's chest, but Eleanor wasn't finished. "That said, legal proceedings can be messy and traumatic, especially for children. My goal is to prevent this from reaching that stage." She tapped her notebook. "We need to understand Charlotte's motivation. Is she genuinely concerned about Emma's welfare, or is she being manipulated by this Richard person?" "Charlotte never approved of my decision to leave academia," Daniel explained. "She thought I was throwing away my career. After Sarah died, she suggested Emma might be better off living with her while I got back on my feet professionally. And now that you have gotten back on your feet professionally, she's still pursuing custody," Eleanor noted. "That suggests external motivation." James checked his watch. "Sophia will be joining us shortly. She's meeting with Richard and the board chairman to address his accusations directly." "Good," Eleanor nodded. "We need to fight this on both fronts. Neutralize Richard's corporate attack and prepare a counter-strategy for Charlotte's custody claim." As if summoned by her name, Sophia appeared at the door, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Richard's been placed on administrative leave," she announced without preamble. "The chairman agrees his behavior is unprofessional and potentially illegal. They're launching an investigation into how he obtained your private emails." "That's a start," James nodded, "but it doesn't solve the immediate problem with Charlotte." "Actually, it might," Sophia said, taking a seat beside Daniel. Her proximity was reassuring, a physical reminder that he wasn't facing this alone. If Richard is behind Charlotte's sudden custody claim, removing him from the equation could change her approach. Or make her more desperate, Eleanor cautioned. If she's being manipulated, she may double down when her handler is compromised. Daniel listened to the discussion with a growing sense of unreality. How had his life come to this? 3 months ago, he'd been fixing leaky faucets and worrying about paying rent. Now he was in a luxury hotel suite with a CEO, a corporate executive, and a high-powered attorney, strategizing about custody battles and corporate espionage. A small sound from the bedroom doorway drew everyone's attention. Emma stood there in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep, eyes wide as she took in the assembled adults. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "What's happening?" Daniel crossed to her immediately, kneeling to her level. "These are friends who are helping us with some grown-up problems. Nothing for you to worry about." Emma's gaze moved past him to Sophia, who offered a warm smile. "Good morning, Emma. I was hoping you might join me for breakfast downstairs while your dad finishes his meeting. They have chocolate chip pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse." The strategic diversion worked exactly as intended. Emma's face lit up, her concerns momentarily forgotten. "Can I, Daddy?" Daniel hesitated only briefly. If anyone besides himself could be trusted with Emma's safety right now, it was Sophia. "Of course. Get dressed and brush your teeth first." As Emma scampered back to her room, Eleanor spoke quietly. "She seems well-adjusted, happy. That will matter if this does reach a courtroom." She is happy, Daniel said firmly. Despite everything she's been through, despite losing her mother, she's a normal, healthy 8-year-old girl, and I intend to keep it that way. And the determination in his voice silenced the room. This wasn't just a client fighting a legal battle or an employee defending his position. This was a father protecting his child with every resource at his disposal. We'll need to continue the negotiations with Schneider today, James reminded him gently. The Germans specifically requested your presence. I'll be there, Daniel nodded. This merger is too important to the company, to all of us, to let Richard's personal vendetta derail it. I'll accompany Emma to breakfast and keep her occupied this morning, Sophia offered. Perhaps a visit to the aquarium afterward? That should give you time for both the negotiations and any legal preparations Eleanor needs. Daniel felt a surge of gratitude so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. Thank you, he said simply, the words inadequate for the depth of feeling behind them. Emma returned, dressed in her favorite outfit, hair hastily brushed but still unruly. Sophia took her hand with natural ease. Ready for those pancakes? Can we get extra syrup? Emma asked as they headed for the door. Think that can be arranged, Sophia laughed, the sound light and genuine. As the door closed behind them, Eleanor turned to Daniel with renewed focus. Now let's talk strategy. I've taken the liberty of preparing a cease and desist letter to Charlotte's attorney. It outlines the legal ramifications of pursuing a baseless custody claim, including potential countersuits for emotional distress and interference with parental rights. Will that stop her? Daniel asked. It might give her pause, especially if she's being manipulated by Richard. But we need more. Eleanor tapped her pen thoughtfully. We need to understand the full extent of their collusion. James, can your corporate security team investigate Richard's communications? Already in progress, James confirmed. We're focusing on external contacts in the past month, looking for connections to Charlotte Williams or her attorney. The meeting continued for another hour, laying out contingencies and preparations for every scenario. By the time they finished, Daniel felt more grounded, the initial panic replaced by resolute determination. This was a battle he could fight, not alone but with allies who brought expertise and resources he could never have marshaled on his own. As they prepared to leave for the Schneider negotiations, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Emma having best pancakes ever. Going to aquarium after. Don't worry about us. Focus on negotiations. We've got this. Attached was a photo of Emma, face alight with delight, a fork full of chocolate chip pancake halfway to her mouth. The simple moment of childhood joy amid crisis reminded Daniel of what he was fighting for. Not just custody, but Emma's right to these ordinary pleasures, to a childhood unmarred by adult conflicts. The Schneider headquarters hummed with anticipation as the negotiation teams reassembled. The Germans, true to form, had arrived early, their documents arranged with mathematical precision. Daniel greeted them in their native language, receiving warm responses that contrasted sharply with the tension he still carried from the morning's revelations. Dr. Carter, Dr. Weber said, shaking his hand firmly. We missed you at dinner last night. I hope nothing is wrong. Just a minor family matter, Daniel replied smoothly. Nothing that will affect our discussions today. Weber nodded, accepting the explanation without further inquiry, a typically German respect for professional boundaries that Daniel appreciated more than ever. James took control of the meeting with practiced ease, guiding the teams through the remaining technical specifications and financial terms. Throughout the morning, Daniel provided cultural context and linguistic precision, helping bridge the communication gaps that had stalled progress for months. By lunchtime, both sides were expressing cautious optimism. The framework for the merger was taking solid form, with only a few key points still requiring resolution. As they broke for a catered lunch in an adjacent conference room, Daniel checked his phone, finding another reassuring text from Sophia. Emma charming everyone at aquarium, making friends with penguins and marine biologists alike. The afternoon session focused on the most challenging aspect of the merger, the integration of Schneider's proprietary cardiac monitoring software with MMT's existing systems. Here, the cultural differences emerged most strongly, with the Germans expressing concerns about maintaining their exacting standards while the American team pushed for faster implementation. Daniel found himself fully engaged in the technical discussion. his linguistics background allowing him to translate not just words but concepts across the cultural divide. This was the work he was meant to do, intellectually challenging, practically important, drawing on the expertise he'd spent years developing. For those hours, he was able to set aside the personal crisis looming over him, focusing entirely on the task at hand. The relief of that focus was almost physical, a temporary respite from the anxiety that had gripped him since the previous night. As the day's negotiations concluded successfully, Dr. Weber approached Daniel privately. "Your contribution has been invaluable, Dr. Carter," he said, switching to English, out of courtesy to passing colleagues. "I must confess, when Frau Morgan first suggested bringing you into these discussions, I was skeptical, but you have proven to be the bridge we needed." "Thank you," Daniel replied, genuinely touched by the acknowledgement. "It's been a privilege to help bring these two companies together." Weber hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "I hope you won't find this inappropriate, but there has been some talk about difficulties within the MMT team." Daniel maintained his neutral expression with effort. "Oh? Merely corporate rumors, I'm sure, but as someone who values clear communication, I felt I should mention it." Weber's gaze was direct, professional, but not unkind. "Whatever internal challenges MMT may be facing, please know that Schneider values your expertise. Should your circumstances ever change, we would be interested in discussing opportunities." The implication was clear: a job offer, delicately presented. Daniel was momentarily stunned, both by the offer itself and by the revelation that Schneider was aware of the turmoil within MMT. "That's very kind," he managed, "but I'm committed to seeing this merger through successfully." Weber nodded, apparently satisfied. "Of course, I merely wished you to know you have options. In our experience, the best professionals always do." As Daniel left the building, his mind whirled with the implications of Weber's comments. How much did Schneider know about Richard's accusations, about Daniel's precarious position? And had Weber just offered him a safety net, or was there something more strategic at play? Back at the hotel, Daniel found Sophia and Emma in the suite's living room, surrounded by aquarium souvenirs and takeout containers from a popular local restaurant. "Daddy!" Emma launched herself at him, bubbling with excitement. "We saw sharks and giant turtles and Mr. Mums. Morgan got us special behind-the-scenes passes so we could pet the stingrays." "That sounds amazing," Daniel said, catching her in a hug that was perhaps a bit tighter, a bit longer than usual. The simple physical reassurance of her presence, safe and happy, steadied something in him that had been trembling since Charlotte's threat. "Emma is a natural marine biologist," Sophia observed, her smile warm as she watched their reunion. "She asked the most insightful questions." The staff was impressed. "Mom always said the ocean is like space but easier to visit," Emma explained seriously. "Full of undiscovered things." The casual reference to Sarah no longer carried the sharp edge of grief it once had. Now it was simply part of Emma's understanding of the world, her mother's wisdom integrated into her developing perspective. "Your mom was very smart," Sophia agreed, "and she'd be so proud of you today." When the comment, delivered with simple sincerity, brought unexpected tears to Daniel's eyes. This woman, who had once judged them both so harshly in a grocery store, now spoke of Sarah with respect and recognized Emma's gifts with genuine appreciation. As Emma retreated to her room to organize her new treasures, Sophia updated Daniel on the day's legal developments. "Eleanor filed the cease and desist with Charlotte's attorney this morning. No response yet, but James's security team found something interesting. Multiple phone calls between Richard and a Boston number in the past week. They're still tracing it, but it could be Charlotte's attorney." "Weber mentioned something today," Daniel said, keeping his voice low. "He implied Schneider is aware of the situation with Richard. He even suggested they might be interested in hiring me if my circumstances change." Sophia's expression sharpened. "That's interesting timing and potentially concerning for the merger. If Schneider thinks MMT is unstable internally, they might reconsider the partnership," Daniel finished, "which is exactly what Richard would want if he can't control the terms." "We need to contain this," Sophia agreed. "The board is meeting tomorrow morning to address Richard's behavior formally. James and I will present our case. With your permission, I'd like Eleanor to attend as well, to address the legal implications of Richard's actions toward you personally." Of course, Daniel nodded. What about the Schneider negotiations? They'll continue as scheduled. You've built enough trust with their team that your presence may actually reassure them that MMT is committed to the merger despite any internal difficulties. As they discussed strategy for the coming day, Daniel was struck by how naturally they had become partners in this crisis. Sophia's analytical mind complemented his academic thoroughness. Her corporate experience balanced his cultural insights. They worked together with an ease that belied their brief acquaintance. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep surrounded by her aquarium souvenirs, Daniel's phone rang. The screen showed Charlotte's number. He answered with cautious formality. Charlotte. What the hell, Daniel? Her voice was tight with anger. A cease and desist, legal threats? This isn't like you. Filing for custody of Emma without even speaking to me first isn't like you, he countered, keeping his voice low to avoid waking his daughter. What's really going on here, Charlotte? There was a pause, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. I'm concerned about Emma's welfare. That's all. No, it's not. Daniel's patience had reached its limit. For 2 years, you've kept your distance. Occasional emails, birthday, and Christmas gifts. Now suddenly you're filing for emergency custody? Something changed, and I think that something is named Richard Peterson. The silence that followed told him he had hit a nerve. I don't know what you're talking about, Charlotte finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. A man approached you recently, didn't he? Expressed concerns about my ability to care for Emma? Maybe suggested I was unstable or that my new job was putting her at risk? Daniel pressed, following the thread of logic. He offered to help with legal expenses, perhaps? Made it all sound so reasonable? You don't understand, Charlotte said, her voice suddenly small. He had documents, Daniel. Emails from your university account, reports from your department head about your declining performance during Sarah's illness. He said you were on the verge of being fired for professional misconduct before you resigned. The calculated cruelty of Richard's manipulation took Daniel's breath away. He had taken Daniel's most vulnerable moments, his desperate attempts to balance teaching responsibilities with Sarah's care, his declining professional performance under the weight of grief and exhaustion, and weaponized them against him. Charlotte, listen to me, Daniel said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Those emails are being taken completely out of context. Yes, I struggled professionally while Sarah was dying. Anyone would have. But there was no misconduct, no impending termination. Richard Peterson is manipulating you because he has a personal vendetta against me and my employer. Why would he do that? Charlotte asked, doubt creeping into her voice. He seemed genuinely concerned about Emma. He's trying to sabotage a $50 million corporate merger, Daniel explained, and he's using my daughter, your niece, as leverage. Is that really someone whose judgment you trust when it comes to Emma's welfare? The silence stretched longer this time. Daniel could almost hear Charlotte's mind working, reevaluating her assumptions in light of this new information. I want to see Emma, she said finally. Not for legal reasons, just as her aunt, to see for myself that she's okay. It was a retreat, though not a complete surrender. Daniel considered his options, weighing the risks against the potential benefits of allowing Charlotte to witness firsthand how well Emma was thriving. We'll be back home on Friday, he said finally. You can come to our apartment for dinner that evening. Just you, no attorneys, no Richard Peterson, no legal agenda, just family. Agreed, Charlotte said, relief evident in her voice. And Daniel, if what you're saying about this man is true, I'm sorry. I really did think I was acting in Emma's best interest. After hanging up, Daniel immediately called Eleanor to update her on this development. The attorney was cautiously optimistic. This could be a positive turn, she observed. If Charlotte is backing away from Richard's influence, we may be able to resolve the custody threat without court involvement. But proceed carefully. Have your apartment looking its best. Emphasize the stability and happiness of Emma's life with you. And I'd suggest having a friend present, perhaps Ms. Morgan, since Charlotte should meet the people who are part of Emma's regular life now. The suggestion made sense, though Daniel hesitated at the thought of involving Sophia in yet another aspect of his personal crisis. She had already gone far beyond professional courtesy in her support, but there was no denying that her presence had become significant in both his and Emma's lives. If Charlotte was to understand their new reality, Meeting Sophia was an important part of that. The following morning brought both challenge and resolution. The MMT board meeting was scheduled for 9 with the Schneider negotiations resuming at 11. Daniel met with Eleanor beforehand to prepare his statement regarding Richard's actions. Keep it factual, unemotional, she advised. The board needs to understand the legal and ethical boundaries that were crossed, not just the personal impact. The boardroom was imposing, mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The board members, 6 men and 3 women ranging in age from mid-50s to late 70s, watched with expressions of polite concern as Sophia presented the evidence against Richard. Corporate espionage, unauthorized access to private records, interfering with an employee's family relationships for leverage. These actions go beyond unprofessional, she concluded. They expose MMT to significant legal liability and threaten the Schneider merger, which represents a cornerstone of our European expansion strategy. James followed with a detailed timeline, connecting Richard's increasingly hostile behavior to specific advances in the merger negotiations. It became clear that Richard was attempting to maintain personal control over the Schneider relationship. When Daniel's expertise accelerated progress, Richard's opposition became more extreme. When Daniel's turn came, he spoke with the measured clarity that had once made him an effective professor. I came to MMT through unusual circumstances, but my commitment to this company and to the success of the Schneider merger has been absolute. Richard Peterson's actions have not only threatened my professional standing, but have created a baseless custody challenge for my daughter, who has already endured the loss of her mother. I respectfully request that the board take appropriate action to address this breach of corporate and personal ethics. Eleanor then outlined the legal implications, her presentation crisp and authoritative. Mr. Peterson's actions expose MMT to potential liability for invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with parental rights. Furthermore, his unauthorized access to private university emails may constitute computer fraud under federal law. Throughout these presentations, Richard sat stone-faced at the far end of the table, his attorney beside him. When given the opportunity to respond, his defense was surprisingly weak, vague assertions about due diligence and legitimate concerns that sounded hollow against the specific evidence presented. The board chairman, a distinguished woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes, called for a closed session to deliberate. Daniel, Sophia, James, Eleanor, Richard, and his attorney were asked to wait outside. The corridor felt like a neutral zone between warring factions. Richard stood apart, conferring in low tones with his lawyer. Daniel found himself gravitating towards Sophia, drawing strength from her calm confidence. "Whatever happens in there," she said quietly, "we still have the Schneider negotiations this afternoon. Are you ready for that?" The question was a lifeline, pulling him back to the work that mattered, the purpose that had given him new direction after years of struggling. "Yes," he answered with more certainty than he felt. "The merger is too important to let personal conflicts derail it." Sophia's smile held approval in something warmer. "That's why you belong at MMT, Daniel. Not just your linguistic skills or your cultural knowledge, but your commitment to the work itself." Before he could respond, the boardroom doors opened. The chairman's expression revealed nothing as she invited them back inside. After reviewing the evidence presented, she began once everyone was seated, "The board has reached several conclusions. First, Richard Peterson's investigation into Dr. Carter's background exceeded appropriate professional boundaries and potentially violated legal and ethical standards. Second, his communication with Dr. Carter's former sister-in-law regarding custody matters constitutes unacceptable interference in an employee's personal life. Richard's face had gone pale, his knuckles white where he gripped the armrests of his chair. Effective immediately, Mr. Peterson is terminated from his position as Chief Financial Officer of Morgan Medical Technologies. Company devices and access credentials will be surrendered before leaving the building. A severance package reflecting his years of service, but accounting for the circumstances of his departure, will be processed by Human Resources. The pronouncement fell like a gavel. Richard's expression shifted from shock to fury, but his attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. "Dr. Carter," the chairman continued, turning to Daniel, The board extends its sincere apologies for the distress these events have caused you and your daughter. We value your contributions to MMT and particularly to the Schneider negotiations. A formal letter to this effect will be provided for your records, should it be needed for any legal proceedings related to your daughter's welfare. Thank you, Madam Chairman, Daniel replied, relief washing through him. I appreciate the board's thorough consideration of this matter. As the meeting concluded, Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This isn't over, he said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. You'll regret this, Sophia. All of you will. That's enough, Richard, James said firmly. Security will escort you to clear out your office. Don't make this worse than it already is. As Richard was led away, the tension in the room gradually dissipated. Board members approached Daniel individually, offering personal apologies and words of support. The genuine concern they expressed confirmed what he had begun to suspect, that he had found not just employment at MMT, but a professional community that valued integrity alongside expertise. The Schneider negotiations that afternoon proceeded with renewed energy and focus. Without Richard's obstructive presence, the American team moved with greater confidence and flexibility. By day's end, the framework for the merger was complete, with only final legal reviews remaining before signatures. Dr. Weber sought Daniel out as the teams were packing up. I understand there have been some changes at MMT today, he said, his tone neutral but his eyes keenly observant. Yes, Daniel acknowledged, seeing no benefit in denial. Some internal restructuring that will ultimately strengthen the company. Weber nodded, satisfied with the diplomatic response. Good. Stability is important in a partnership, as is knowing when to remove problematic elements. He extended his hand. We look forward to working with you in the implementation phase, Mr. Carter. Your role in bridging our companies has been invaluable. Back at the hotel, Daniel found Sophia in the lobby, waiting with Emma, who was engrossed in a new book about marine biology, clearly another aquarium purchase. How did it go? Sophia asked, though the relief on his face likely answered her question. The framework is complete, Daniel confirmed. Weber seemed pleased with the resolution of the internal matters. Emma looked up from her book. Is your work all done, Daddy? Can we go home tomorrow? Yes, sweetheart. We'll fly back in the morning. He knelt beside her chair. And guess what? Aunt Charlotte is coming to visit us for dinner on Friday. Emma's eyes widened with surprise. Really? She hardly ever visits. She wants to see you, Choi, Daniel explained carefully, to catch up on everything that's happened since we last saw her. Can I show her my drawings? And tell her about the aquarium? Of course, Daniel smiled, touched by her simple enthusiasm for reconnecting with her mother's sister, despite the complicated adult dynamics surrounding the visit. Will Ms. Morgan come too? Emma asked, looking up at Sophia with hopeful eyes. Aunt Charlotte should meet my friends. The question created a moment of awkward silence. Daniel hadn't yet had the chance to discuss Charlotte's visit with Sophia, let alone invite her to join them. But Sophia recovered quickly, her smile warm but careful. That would be lovely if your dad thinks it's a good idea. I do, Daniel said, realizing as he spoke that he meant it. Charlotte should meet the people who are important in our lives now. The significance of the statement hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement that Sophia had become more than an employer, more than a colleague, more than even a friend who had helped in a crisis. She had become a part of their family story, a character in the narrative of their lives moving forward. That evening, as they packed for the journey home, Daniel reflected on the extraordinary transformation of the past 3 months. From a chance encounter in a grocery store to a corporate crisis in Boston, his life had undergone a rebirth he could never have anticipated. He had reclaimed his professional identity, not as an academic, but as something new, a bridge builder between cultures and companies, using his expertise in ways that created tangible value. He had secured Emma's future, not just financially but emotionally, surrounding her with new relationships that expanded her world beyond the grief they had shared. And he had found connections he hadn't been seeking. With Sophia, whose journey from judgmental stranger to essential ally mirrored his own growth. With James, whose straightforward friendship offered male companionship he hadn't realized he was missing. With a company that valued his unique abilities and stood by him in crisis. As Emma slept peacefully in the hotel suite's second bedroom, Daniel stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the Boston skyline glittering against the night sky. The air held the first hint of autumn crispness, a reminder that seasons change, that life moves forward even when we feel stuck in place. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Early flight tomorrow. Car will pick you up at 7. Everything is arranged. You did amazing work here, Daniel. Not just with Schneider, but with everything. I'm proud to have you on our team. The simple message warmed him in ways that went beyond professional appreciation. There was something personal in it, something that acknowledged the journey they had taken together from that first hostile boss encounter to this moment of shared triumph. Daniel typed his reply carefully. Thank you for believing in me when I barely believed in myself, for seeing value where others saw only weakness, for giving Emma and me a chance at a new beginning. He hesitated, then added, I'm looking forward to Friday, to Charlotte meeting the woman who helped change our lives. The response came quickly. So am I. Safe travels tomorrow. See you back home. Home. The word resonated with new meaning. Home wasn't just the apartment they would return to, the physical space they occupied. Home was the sense of belonging they had found, in a new community, in meaningful work, in connections that sustained rather than drained. As Daniel turned back into the suite, closing the balcony door against the night air, he felt a certainty he hadn't experienced since before Sarah's illness. Whatever challenges still lay ahead, Charlotte's visit, the final merger details, the everyday complexities of raising Emma alone, he would face them not with desperation, but with confidence, not because he had all the answers, but because he no longer had to find them alone.